mess hall at Naval Station Norfolk sits at capacity during the 1800 dinner rush. Logistics specialist second-class Sarah Martinez stands in line with her tray, her Navy working uniform crisp despite the September humidity that clings to everything in coastal Virginia. At 5'6" with a compact athletic build, she blends into the crowd of sailors moving through the cafeteria-style serving line. Her uniform bears the standard insignia of her rate, the LS chevrons indicating her role in supply chain management. What it doesn't bear is any indication of the 18 months she spent attached to a SEAL team, the specialized training that transformed her from a logistics coordinator into something the Navy doesn't officially acknowledge exists in her specific combination, a female operator with Tier 1 combat experience who's been quietly returned to conventional duty after a mission went sideways. Sarah's hands are steady as she selects her meal: grilled chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. No tremor. No visible indication of the hypervigilance that makes her automatically catalog exits, potential threats, defensive positions. That's all internal now, managed through 2 years of therapy with a VA psychologist who specializes in what the Navy clinically terms operational stress injuries. The mess hall is loud. Hundreds of conversations create a wall of sound that makes Sarah's ears ring slightly, a residual effect of the flashbang that gave her mild TBI during her last op. But she's learned to filter the noise, to function despite the sensory overload that sometimes makes her want to retreat to silence and darkness. She finds an empty table in the corner, positioning herself with her back to the wall and clear sight lines to the entrance. Old habits. Habits that her current command doesn't understand because they don't know about the classified portions of her service record. As far as her current CO is concerned, Sarah Martinez is a competent but unremarkable logistics specialist who manages supply requisitions and inventory tracking. She's never late, never causes problems, and maintains professional distance from most of her peers. Exactly the kind of sailor who fades into the bureaucratic background of a large naval installation, which is how she prefers it. Sarah is 28 years old and looks younger, a factor that's both helped and hindered her throughout her career. Helped during the undercover aspects of her SEAL attachment, where appearing unthreatening was an operational advantage. Hindered during every other interaction where people make assumptions about her capabilities based on her appearance. She's eating mechanically, barely tasting the food when she hears the laughter. 4 voices, male, carrying that particular tone of young sailors who've been in service just long enough to develop arrogance but not enough to develop judgment. Sarah doesn't look up. She's learned that making eye contact in situations like this can be interpreted as either challenge or invitation, and she wants neither. "Check it out," one of the voices says, louder now. The supply chick sitting all tactical in the corner. "What, you afraid someone's gonna steal your chicken?" Sarah continues eating. She's heard variations of this for years. In her current assignment, she's used to being invisible until someone decides to make her visible for their own entertainment. "Yo, logistics," another voice closer. "You always sit like you're expecting enemy contact in the mess hall?" Sarah sets down her fork carefully. She could ignore this. Should ignore this. Getting into confrontations with junior sailors serves no purpose and creates exactly the kind of attention she's trying to avoid. But they're not stopping. They're approaching her table now. 4 of them, all male, all appearing to be in their early 20s. 3 are seaman recruits based on their rank insignia. The 4th is a third-class petty officer who should know better than to engage in this kind of behavior. Sarah evaluates the threat level automatically, low to moderate. They're not overtly aggressive, just stupid and bored. The mess hall is crowded with witnesses. The situation should de-escalate naturally if she doesn't engage. The 3rd class, his name tape reads Kowalski, stops directly across from her table. He's maybe 6 feet tall, solid build. The kind of sailor who probably played football in high school and hasn't adjusted to the reality that physical size doesn't automatically translate to authority or respect in the military. "I asked you a question, LS," Kowalski says. His tone is aggressive friendly, that specific combination young men use when they're testing boundaries. "You always sit like you're in a combat zone?" Sarah looks up, making deliberate eye contact. She keeps her voice level, professional, completely devoid of emotion. "I'm eating my dinner, petty officer. I suggest you do the same." One of the recruits, muscular blonde, name tape says, Fisher, laughs. Oh shit, she talks. And she's got that, I'm gonna report you to the CO voice. Classic. Sarah returns her attention to her food. She's given them an out. If they're smart, they'll take it and move on. But she can already sense they're not going to be smart. Kowalski sits down at her table without invitation. Violation of personal space, dominance play. Sarah's muscle memory immediately maps the response. Sweep the leg, control the head, apply pressure to the carotid until loss of consciousness. 2 seconds, maybe 3. But she doesn't move. She's not that person anymore. Not officially. That version of Sarah Martinez exists only in classified files that her current command can't access. See, here's what I don't get. Kowalski continues, leaning forward. You supply types act all important with your clipboards and your requisition forms. But you're not real Navy, you know? You're not out there doing the actual work. You're just logistics. He says the last word with contempt, like it's a slur. Sarah takes a breath, holds it for a count of 3, releases it slowly. Dr. Chen, her therapist, taught her this technique for managing the rage that sometimes surges up when people dismiss her service. The rage that comes from knowing she's done things most of these sailors couldn't imagine, survived missions most of them would never be cleared to hear about, and earned skills they'll never develop, all while being unable to defend herself with the truth because the truth is classified. Logistics keeps you supplied with ammunition, food, fuel, and equipment, Sarah says evenly. Without logistics, combat operations stop. So yes, I'm logistics. And yes, it's real Navy. Fisher leans on the table now, crowding Sarah's space from the side. Damn, she's getting defensive. What, you got something to prove, supply girl? The 4th member of their group, youngest looking, name tape says Murphy, seems less comfortable with this confrontation. He's hanging back slightly, not directly participating, but not stopping it either. Sarah assesses the tactical situation. She's surrounded on 3 sides. Kowalski is directly across from her, too close. Fisher is to her left, also too close. The 3rd recruit, whose name she hasn't caught, is to her right, maintaining slightly more distance but still within striking range. Murphy is behind and to the left, approximately 6 feet away. If this were a hostile situation, if these were actual threats rather than stupid kids playing dominance games, Sarah would have multiple options for neutralization. She's been trained by people who understand that size and gender are less important than skill, speed, and willingness to apply violence decisively. But this isn't a hostile situation. It's just harassment. Unpleasant, unprofessional, but not dangerous. Not yet. I don't have anything to prove, Sarah says, maintaining her calm tone. But you might want to consider whether this conversation is going to look good when I file the incident report. Kowalski's smile widens. Incident report. Classic. You're going to run to the chain of command because some sailors talked to you in the mess hall? That's soft. Sarah stands, picking up her tray. She's done with this conversation. Time to remove herself from the situation before it escalates further. But as she stands, Fisher shifts position, blocking her exit path. Not overtly. He's standing in a space that could be coincidental. But Sarah recognizes the tactic. They're boxing her in, controlling her movement options. Where you going? Fisher asks. We're just being friendly, getting to know the logistics specialist. You know, since you're sitting here all by yourself looking lonely. Sarah's assessment of threat level adjusts. Moderate. They're escalating, testing how far they can push. Still not overtly violent, but the crowd dynamics are shifting in a direction she's seen before. Young men feeding off each other's energy, each one trying to prove something to the group. Step aside, Sarah says quietly. Or what? Fisher's voice carries a challenge now. You gonna make me? You and your supply chain management skills? Around them, other sailors are starting to notice the confrontation. Some are watching with interest. Others are pointedly ignoring it. The standard military response to situations that aren't your problem. Sarah considers her options. She could make a scene, call for the master-at-arms, file an official complaint. That would end the immediate situation but create documentation, attention, questions about why a logistics specialist was being harassed, potential investigation into her background. Or she could de-escalate verbally, find a way to diffuse the tension without creating an incident that requires official response. I don't want trouble, Sarah says, keeping her voice level. You don't want trouble. So let's all walk away from this before it becomes something neither of us wants to explain to the Command Master Chief. Kowalski stands now, and Sarah realizes he's made the decision to escalate. She can see it in his body language, the way he squares his shoulders, the slight forward lean, the hands that have shifted from relaxed to ready. See, I think you do want trouble, Kowalski says. I think you've been sitting here acting all hard, and now you need to back it up. He takes a step forward, entering Sarah's personal space aggressively, and that's when everything changes. Sarah's body responds before her conscious mind fully registers the threat. 18 months of training with some of the most elite combat operators in the world have created reflexes that bypass rational thought. When Kowalski enters her space with clear aggressive intent, her threat assessment system makes an automatic determination. Imminent danger. Defensive response authorized. What happens next takes less than 15 seconds. Sarah's left hand shoots up, catching Kowalski's right wrist as he reaches toward her. The grip is precise. Thumb on the radial nerve, fingers wrapped around the wrist joint. She rotates his arm outward and down in a movement so fast that Kowalski doesn't have time to react. His body follows his compromised wrist, bending forward. Sarah steps to his left side, maintaining control of his arm while her right hand comes up to his shoulder. She applies pressure in two directions simultaneously, down on the wrist, forward on the shoulder, and Kowalski goes to his knees with a sharp intake of breath that might be surprise or might be pain. Fisher reacts, stepping forward with his hands coming up. Sarah releases Kowalski and rotates toward Fisher in a single fluid motion. Her left hand deflects Fisher's incoming right hand, while her right delivers a palm strike to his solar plexus. Not full force, just enough to drive the air from his lungs and stop his forward momentum. As Fisher doubles over, gasping, Sarah pivots to address the third recruit who's now reaching for her shoulder. She ducks under his arm, comes up inside his guard, and strikes the inside of his elbow with her forearm. His arm buckles. She follows with a sweep of his forward leg, and he goes down hard, landing on his back on the mess hall floor. The entire sequence, from Kowalski's initial grab to the third recruit hitting the ground, has taken approximately 8 seconds. Murphy, the fourth member of the group, has frozen in place, his hands raised in a gesture that's half surrender, half shock. Sarah stands in the space she's created, her breathing controlled, her stance balanced, her hands relaxed at her sides. Around her, the mess hall has gone completely silent. Hundreds of sailors are staring at the logistics specialist who just dropped 3 men in less time than it takes to tie a shoe. Kowalski is on his knees, cradling his wrist, his face a mixture of pain and confusion. Fisher is bent over, trying to catch his breath. The third recruit is on his back, staring at the ceiling with an expression suggesting he's not entirely sure what just happened. Sarah looks at Murphy. Are you going to be a problem? Her voice is calm, almost gentle. Murphy shakes his head vigorously. No, ma'am. No problem. Good. Sarah picks up her tray from where she'd set it on the table. Then I suggest you help your friends to medical. Kowalski's wrist might be sprained. Fisher will be fine once he catches his breath. The other one, she glances at the recruit still on the floor, should probably get checked for a concussion. He hit the deck pretty hard. She walks toward the exit and the crowd parts automatically. Every sailor in the mess hall watches her go, their expressions ranging from shock to respect to something that might be fear. Sarah dumps her tray at the collection point, exits the mess hall, and makes it approximately 50 feet before the adrenaline dump hits. Her hands start shaking. Her heart rate, which had remained remarkably controlled during the confrontation, now spikes. The familiar cascade of post-engagement symptoms that Dr. Chen has helped her understand as normal physiological response to combat stress. Except this wasn't combat. This was a mess hall in Norfolk, Virginia. These were junior sailors being stupid, not enemy combatants. And Sarah just responded to their stupidity with techniques designed to neutralize hostile threats in operational environments. She leans against a building wall, forcing her breathing into the controlled pattern Dr. Chen taught her. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. Repeat until the physiological storm passes. Her phone buzzes. A text from a number she doesn't recognize. You need to call Commander Reeves, now. Sarah stares at the text. Commander Patricia Reeves is the CO of Naval Special Warfare Group 2. She's also one of the few people in the Navy who knows the full details of Sarah's classified service record. The missions, the training, the reason Sarah was quietly transitioned back to conventional logistics duty after her last operation. If Reeves is reaching out through unofficial channels, it means someone has already reported what just happened in the mess hall, which means Sarah's careful invisibility has just been comprehensively destroyed. She pulls up Reeves's number from her classified contacts, a separate phone she's required to maintain for communications related to her previous assignment, and makes the call. Reeves answers on the first ring. Martinez, I just got a call from the COB at your current command. Apparently you put 3 sailors on the ground in the mess hall. Want to tell me what happened? Sarah gives a concise report. The harassment, the escalation, the moment when Kowalski entered her space with clear aggressive intent, her defensive response. Reeves is quiet for a moment. Then, you broke your cover. Yes, ma'am. In spectacular fashion, apparently. The cops said it looked like something from a training video. Perfect technique, controlled application of force, no excessive injury. Reeves pauses. Also said he's never seen anyone move that fast outside of sealed training footage. Sarah closes her eyes. Her cover, her carefully maintained persona as an unremarkable logistics specialist, has just been obliterated in front of hundreds of witnesses. Ma'am, they were escalating. Kowalski grabbed for me. I assessed it as imminent threat and responded according to training. I know. I'm not questioning your judgment. Reeves's voice softens slightly. But you understand what this means. Your current CO is going to have questions. Questions about how a logistics specialist knows SEAL neutralization techniques. Questions that require answers involving classified information he's not cleared to access. Yes, ma'am. I'm coming to Norfolk tomorrow. We'll meet with your CO, provide him with the minimum necessary context, and figure out how to manage this situation. Reeves pauses again. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What you did tonight, defending yourself against aggressive sailors, that was justified. But it's also going to change everything. You can't go back to invisible after this. Sarah knows Reeves is right. The logistics specialist who fades into the background, who processes requisitions and avoids attention, is gone. Whatever comes next will be different. I understand, ma'am. Good. Go home. Document everything that happened tonight in a written statement. Email it to me encrypted. And Martinez, don't talk to anyone about your previous assignment. If your chain of command asks questions, refer them to me. The call ends. Sarah stands against the wall, watching sailors move between buildings in the twilight. She thinks about the 15 seconds that just changed everything, the moment when her trained reflexes overrode her carefully maintained cover. She thinks about Kowalski, Fisher, and the third recruit, all of them probably in medical right now getting checked out, trying to explain to the corpsman how a female logistics specialist put them on the ground so fast they barely saw it coming. Most of all, she thinks about what Commander Reeves said. You can't go back to invisible after this. Sarah had spent 2 years building her invisibility. 2 years proving she could function in conventional duty, despite the classified missions that had earned her skills most sailors would never develop. 2 years managing her symptoms, the hypervigilance, the occasional flashbacks, the way loud noises sometimes made her flinch, while maintaining the appearance of a normal, unremarkable sailor. All of it gone in 15 seconds. Sarah pushes off from the wall and starts walking toward her barracks. She has a statement to write, a situation to document, and a chain of command that's about to learn more than they ever wanted to know about what happens when you corner a SEAL operator who's been pretending to be something she's not. Sarah sits at the small desk in her barracks room, her laptop open, working on the incident report Commander Reeves requested. The room is standard Navy enlisted quarters, roughly 150 square feet, containing a bed, desk, small closet, and shared bathroom down the hall. The walls are bare except for a single photograph. Sarah with her parents at her boot camp graduation, both of them beaming with pride at their daughter who'd just become a sailor. The photo was taken 8 years ago. Sarah was 20 years old, fresh out of high school in San Antonio, Texas, eager to see the world beyond her working-class neighborhood. The Navy had seemed like the perfect opportunity. Education benefits, travel, a chance to prove she was more than the expectations people had for a petite Latina woman whose guidance counselor had suggested she consider cosmetology school. That eager 20-year-old would barely recognize the person Sarah has become. She types methodically, documenting the events in the clinical language of military incident reports. At approximately 18:30 hours on 14th of September 2024, while eating dinner in the main mess hall at Naval Station Norfolk, I was approached by 4 sailors who engaged in harassment and intimidation. The interaction escalated when Petty Officer 3rd Class Kowalski made physical contact with aggressive intent. I responded with defensive techniques sufficient to neutralize the immediate threat without causing excessive injury. The report doesn't mention that the defensive techniques were SEAL close-quarters combat methods. It doesn't explain how an LS-2 learned to execute joint locks and strikes with the precision of an operator who's trained thousands of hours in hand-to-hand neutralization. Those details will go in the classified annex that Commander Reeves will attach when she briefs Sarah's CO. Sarah's phone buzzes. Another text from an unknown number. "You're all over social media. Might want to check." She opens Twitter and immediately finds the video. Someone in the mess hall had been recording, probably documenting something else entirely, and caught the entire 15-second sequence. The video is grainy, shot from a distance, but clear enough to show Sarah's movements. The wrist lock, the palm strike, the sweep, all executed with a fluidity that looks choreographed. The tweet has 47,000 views in the 2 hours since it was posted. The comments are predictable. When you mess with the wrong logistics specialist. That's not supply chain management, that's supply pain management. Plot twist, she's actually special forces. Guys really thought they could intimidate her because she's small. Got that assumption corrected real quick. Sarah closes Twitter. The video complicates everything. Commander Reeves can brief Sarah's CO under controlled conditions, provide classified context that explains Sarah's capabilities without revealing operational details. But a viral video means questions from beyond the chain of command. Reporters, naval investigators, possibly even congressional staffers who monitor military social media for potential scandals. Her phone rings. The caller ID shows Dr. Chen, VA. Sarah answers. "Doc, I saw the video." Dr. Chen's voice carries concern. "Are you okay?" Dr. Patricia Chen is a civilian psychologist who works exclusively with special operations personnel, managing combat-related psychological injuries. She's one of 3 people outside Sarah's previous command who knows the full details of Sarah's service record, and she's been helping Sarah navigate the complex process of reintegrating into conventional duty while managing symptoms that most of her current peers wouldn't understand. "Physically, I'm fine. Emotionally," Sarah trails off, not sure how to articulate the complex mixture of relief and dread she's feeling. "You broke cover," Dr. Chen says gently. "The invisibility you've been maintaining for 2 years. It's gone. How does that feel?" "Terrifying. Liberating. Both." Sarah stands, pacing her small room. "I've spent 2 years pretending to be someone I'm not, hiding my training, managing my symptoms in secret, never letting anyone see the real version of me. And tonight I just stopped pretending. Because you were threatened. Because 4 idiots wouldn't leave me alone." Sarah's voice carries frustration. "I tried to de-escalate. I gave them multiple opportunities to walk away. But they kept pushing, and when Kowalski grabbed me, my training took over. That's not a failure, Sarah. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Protect you from imminent threat." Dr. Chen pauses. "But I understand why it feels complicated. You've been working hard to separate your current identity from your previous operational role. Tonight those identities collided." Sarah sits back down, staring at her laptop screen. "Commander Reeves is coming tomorrow to brief my CO. After that, everyone in my chain of command is going to know I'm not just a logistics specialist. They're going to look at me differently, treat me differently. How do you think they'll treat you? Some will respect it. Some will resent it. Some will be afraid of me." Sarah thinks about the expressions on the faces of the sailors in the mess hall, the mixture of shock and fear in their eyes as they watched her move. I've seen how people react when they realize I'm more than I appear to be. It creates distance, makes genuine connection impossible because they're always measuring themselves against what they think I am. "And what do you think you are?" It's the question Dr. Chen has asked a dozen different ways over the past 2 years. The question Sarah still doesn't have a complete answer to. I'm a sailor who did things most people don't do, who trained for things most people don't train for, who has skills most people don't have. Sarah pauses. But I'm also someone trying to live a normal life despite being fundamentally changed by abnormal experiences. And tonight just made the normal life part a lot more complicated. They talk for another 20 minutes. Dr. Chen asking careful questions designed to assess Sarah's psychological state. Sarah providing honest answers about her anxiety, her frustration, her relief at no longer having to hide. When the call ends, Dr. Chen has confirmed what Sarah already knew. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. The weeks that follow will be more difficult. And the path forward requires confronting realities Sarah has been avoiding. Sarah finishes her incident report, encrypts it, and sends it to Commander Reeves. Then she opens a different file, her personal journal, the place where she documents thoughts she can't share with anyone else. September 14th, 2024. I broke my cover tonight. 4 sailors thought they could intimidate me, and I responded the way I was trained to respond. 15 seconds that destroyed 2 years of careful invisibility. I keep thinking about the moment when Kowalski grabbed my wrist. I had options. I could have pulled away, could have made a scene, could have called for the MAA. But my body chose the SEAL response, neutralized the threat efficiently, decisively, with minimal time and minimal injury. Because that's what I am underneath the logistics specialist uniform. Someone trained to respond to aggression with controlled violence. Dr. Chen says this collision of identities was inevitable, that I can't indefinitely maintain a false persona while managing the reality of who I've become. Maybe she's right. Maybe tonight was necessary, a forced integration of the person I was pretending to be and the person I actually am. But I'm scared of what comes next, scared of losing the fragile normal I'd constructed. Scared of being defined entirely by 15 seconds of violence rather than 2 years of competent, quiet service. Commander Reeves arrives tomorrow. After that, everything changes. Sarah closes the journal and prepares for bed. But sleep, when it finally comes, is disrupted by dreams of the mess hall confrontation played on endless loop. Except in the dreams, she doesn't stop at neutralization. In the dreams, her training takes over completely. And the outcome is far more violent than 3 sailors with minor injuries. She wakes at 04:30, her heart racing, her sheets soaked with sweat. The nightmares are less frequent than they used to be. Dr. Chen's therapy has helped significantly. But stress triggers their return, and tonight has provided plenty of stress. Sarah showers, dresses in her working uniform, and reports to her current duty station at 06:30. She works in the supply department, managing inventory and logistics for the naval station's various support functions. It's important work, necessary work, but it's also deliberately chosen for being as far from combat operations as possible. A quiet assignment for a sailor who needed time to decompress from classified missions that can't be discussed. Her supervisor, Chief Warrant Officer Thomas, is waiting at her desk. LS2 Martinez, we need to talk. Thomas is in his late 40s. A career supply specialist who spent 25 years managing Navy logistics. He's competent, fair, and completely unaware that the second-class petty officer he supervises has more combat time than most line officers. They go to his office, a small space dominated by filing cabinets and a desk covered in requisition forms. Thomas closes the door. I got a call from the command master chief this morning. Apparently there was an incident last night in the mess hall. Thomas looks uncomfortable. 4 sailors harassed, 3 of them requiring medical attention. And you at the center of it. Sarah remains at attention. Yes, sir. I filed a complete incident report with Commander Reeves last night. Commander Reeves from Spec Warcom? Thomas's confusion is obvious. Why are you reporting to a special warfare commander instead of through your proper chain of command? Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. Commander Reeves will brief you and the CO this morning at 0900. Thomas studies her for a long moment. Martinez, I've supervised you for 18 months. You're a good sailor, punctual, competent, never any trouble. But last night, I saw the video. What you did in that mess hall, that's not standard Navy training. That's something else entirely. Yes, sir, it is. Are you special operations? Sarah considers her answer carefully. Sir, that question requires a classification level you may not have. Commander Reeves will provide appropriate context during this morning's briefing. Thomas leans back in his chair, processing this information. So I've had a SEAL or something similar working logistics requisitions for 18 months, and nobody thought to mention this to me? Sir, my previous assignment is classified. My current assignment is logistics. Those two things don't intersect unless circumstances force them to intersect. Last night, circumstances forced the intersection. And the 3 sailors you put in medical? Minor injuries, sir. Sprained wrist, bruised solar plexus, possible mild concussion from falling. All of them caused by defensive techniques designed to neutralize aggressive behavior without causing permanent harm. Thomas is quiet for a moment. You know they're going to press charges, or at least their chain of command will want to. 3 sailors injured by 1. He hesitates, clearly recalibrating his understanding of who Sarah is, by 1 highly trained operator who was defending herself. That's going to create political pressure. Sarah knows he's right, but she also knows that Commander Reeves has dealt with similar situations before. Operators whose classified training becomes visible in public circumstances that require careful management. Sir, I suggest we wait for the 0900 briefing. Commander Reeves will address the legal and administrative implications. Thomas nods slowly. Dismissed. But Martinez, whatever comes out of this meeting, whatever I learn about your background, I need you to know that you've been an exemplary sailor under my supervision. That doesn't change based on what you were before. Sarah feels unexpected gratitude. Thank you, sir. She returns to her desk and attempts to focus on work. But her mind keeps returning to the upcoming briefing, to Commander Reeves's arrival, to the moment when her carefully separated identities will be forcibly merged in front of her current chain of command. At 8:45, she receives a text from Reeves. Arrived. Conference room B0900. Bring your incident report. Sarah gathers her documentation and makes her way to the conference room. Commander Reeves is already there, along with several people Sarah doesn't immediately recognize. Reeves is in her mid-40s, tall, with the bearing of someone who's spent decades in special operations leadership. She's one of the Navy's few female commanders with extensive SEAL support experience, and she's known for protecting operators who've served in classified roles. LS2 Martinez, Reeves says formally. Take a seat. We're waiting for your CO and CMC. At 0900 exactly, Captain Richard Morrison and Command Master Chief Angela Torres enter the conference room. Morrison is the commanding officer of Sarah's current command, a surface warfare officer with multiple deployments and a reputation for running a tight ship. Torres is a seasoned senior enlisted leader who's worked her way up through the logistics ratings. Morrison looks at Sarah, then at Reeves, his expression suggesting he's not pleased about being called to a classified briefing regarding one of his junior sailors. Commander Reeves, I understand you have information about LS2 Martinez that requires classified discussion. Before we begin, I need to understand why I'm learning about this situation from Spec Warcom instead of through my own chain of command. Reeves responds calmly. Captain, the information I'm about to share is classified secret, no foreign, and requires specific need-to-know authorization. Until last night's incident, there was no need for you to know the details of LS2 Martinez's previous assignment. The incident changed that calculation. Morrison doesn't look satisfied with this answer, but he nods. Proceed. Reeves pulls up a presentation on the conference room screen. The first slide shows Sarah's official service record, the unclassified portions that Morrison has already reviewed. Standard logistics training, deployment to a supply ship, routine assignments. The second slide shows something different. Redacted sections, black boxes covering dates and unit assignments. Classification markings indicating information above Morrison's normal clearance level. LS2 Martinez was attached to a Special Operations Task Force for 18 months, from January 2022 through June 2023. During that time, she received training in close quarters combat, tactical operations, and classified mission support. The specific details of her training and operations remain classified, but the essential fact is this. Martinez is not a conventional logistics specialist. She's an operator with Tier 1 combat experience who was transitioned back to standard duty after mission complications. Morrison's expression shifts from irritation to surprise. Tier 1? You're telling me I have a SEAL operator working supply chain management? Not a SEAL, Reeves clarifies. Martinez was never a fully qualified SEAL team member, but she was attached to SEAL elements in a support capacity that required her to undergo substantial portions of SEAL training, including advanced combat skills. What kind of mission complications required removing her from special operations? Torres asks. Reeves glances at Sarah before answering. During her final operation, Martinez sustained a traumatic brain injury from a flashbang during a direct action mission. The injury is mild but permanent. It required her to be medically transitioned to non-combat duties. She was assigned to conventional logistics as part of her recovery and reintegration. Morrison processes this information. So last night, when she put 3 sailors on the ground in 15 seconds, she was using SEAL combat techniques? Correct. Martinez was being harassed and physically threatened. She responded with appropriate defensive force using the training she received during her special operations attachment. The techniques she employed are designed for rapid threat neutralization with minimal injury. Exactly what occurred. Sarah watches her CO absorb this information. She can see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Pride at having an operator with that level of training in his command. Concern about the administrative complications. Uncertainty about how to manage a sailor whose capabilities exceed her current role. Torres speaks up. LS2 Martinez has been an outstanding sailor during her time here. Never a disciplinary issue, never a performance problem. If she's been managing post-combat injury while maintaining that level of performance, that's extraordinary. Sarah feels grateful for the CMC's support. Morrison turns to Sarah directly. LS2, I've read the incident reports from last night. 3 sailors claim you attacked them without provocation. Your version states they were harassing you and one of them grabbed you. Commander Reeves, do we have independent verification of what actually happened? We have the video, Reeves says, pulling up the viral clip on the conference room screen. This was recorded by another sailor and posted to social media. It's been viewed over 200,000 times at this point. They watched the 15-second sequence. Even on the grainy video, Sarah's movements are clearly visible. Kowalski approaching aggressively, his hand reaching toward her. Sarah's immediate response, wrist control, takedown, pivot to Fisher, controlled strike, sweep of the 3rd recruit. The entire sequence looks exactly like what it is. Professional operator-level combat skills executed with textbook precision. Morrison pauses the video at the moment Sarah has all 3 sailors neutralized, standing calmly in the space she's created. That's not self-defense training from basic. That's warfare. That's exactly what it is, Reeves confirms. And it's why Martinez's previous assignment was classified. The Navy doesn't publicly acknowledge that we train support personnel to this level of combat capability. But certain operational environments require logistics specialists who can function as operators when circumstances demand it. Morrison sits back in his chair, processing the implications. What are the legal ramifications here? 3 sailors injured, viral video, potential media scrutiny of why a female logistics specialist has special operations training. The Judge Advocate General's office has already reviewed the video and Martinez's service record, Reeves says. Their assessment, clear case of self-defense against aggressive behavior. Kowalski initiated physical contact. Martinez responded with appropriate force. No charges will be filed. What about the 3 sailors? Are they pressing charges? Petty Officer Kowalski initially threatened to file assault charges. That changed when his chain of command reviewed the video and informed him that he would likely face disciplinary action for harassment and initiating the confrontation. Reeves pulls up another document. All 3 sailors have signed statements declining to pursue charges in exchange for no disciplinary action against them for the initial harassment. Torres leans forward. So we're sweeping this under the rug? We're managing it appropriately, Reeves corrects. The sailors were stupid but not malicious. Martinez defended herself professionally. Everyone walks away with lessons learned and no permanent career damage, but she looks directly at Morrison. We can't put Martinez back in the box. Her capabilities are now public knowledge. We need to address what comes next. Morrison looks at Sarah. LS2 Martinez, what do you want to happen next? It's the first time anyone has asked Sarah what she wants rather than telling her what will happen. She takes a moment to consider her answer. Sir, I've spent 2 years trying to prove I could function in conventional duty despite my previous training and my injury. I've been a good logistics specialist because I wanted to be more than my classified record, but last night showed me that I can't separate who I was from who I am. Sarah pauses. I don't want special treatment. I don't want to be the curiosity everyone whispers about. But I also can't pretend anymore that I'm just a standard LS2 who processes requisitions. What would appropriate treatment look like? Sarah has thought about this during the sleepless hours last night. Permission to be honest about my limitations. I have a TBI that causes symptoms I've been managing in secret because I was afraid documentation would be used against me. I want to be able to acknowledge when I'm struggling without it being seen as weakness or evidence that I shouldn't be in service. Dr. Chen would be proud. Sarah is finally advocating for her own needs instead of hiding them. Morrison nods slowly. That's reasonable. CMC, work with medical to ensure Martinez has appropriate accommodation for her injury. Commander Reeves, what's your recommendation for assignment? Martinez needs a role that utilizes her full skill set while acknowledging her medical limitations. I'm recommending she be assigned to the Navy's Resilience and Combat Readiness Training Program, teaching other sailors how to recognize and manage operational stress, how to maintain performance in degraded conditions, how to reintegrate after high-stress assignments. Reeves looks at Sarah. It's similar to what you've been doing in logistics, managing complex systems, but it would allow you to use your operational experience in ways that benefit the broader force. Sarah feels something she hasn't felt in 2 years. Genuine interest in her assignment. The idea of teaching others what she's learned, about managing injury while maintaining capability, about adapting to limitations while refusing to be defined by them, appeals in ways that inventory management never has. I'd be interested in that assignment, ma'am. Good. I'll work with your detailer to make it happen. Reeves closes her presentation. Captain Morrison, I need to emphasize, the specific details of Martinez's operations remain classified. What I've shared today is the minimum necessary context to explain her capabilities. Any requests for additional information need to go through my office. Morrison stands. Understood. LS2 Martinez, you're dismissed. Return to your duty station. CMC will coordinate with you regarding medical accommodations. Sarah stands, salutes, and exits the conference room. In the hallway, she feels the weight of the past 12 hours settling onto her shoulders. Her cover is blown, her carefully constructed invisibility destroyed, her future redirected towards something she never expected. But underneath the anxiety and uncertainty, there's also relief. She doesn't have to pretend anymore. Doesn't have to hide her symptoms, minimize her capabilities, or maintain the exhausting performance of being someone she's not. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah's life transforms in ways both expected and surprising. The video continues to spread across military social media, eventually garnering over 2 million views. News outlets pick up the story. Navy logistics specialist reveals hidden combat training, reads one headline. When supply chain management meets special operations, jokes another. Sarah's chain of command receives dozens of interview requests. She declines all of them, following Commander Reeves' guidance that discussing her previous assignment in any detail would compromise operational security. But within the Navy, the response is more complex. Some sailors treat Sarah with newfound respect, recognizing that her capabilities exceed her rate. Others become uncomfortable around her, unsure how to interact with someone who can drop 3 men in 15 seconds. A few express resentment. Why does a logistics specialist have training that most line sailors never receive? Sarah navigates these reactions with the help of Dr. Chen, who increases their therapy sessions to twice weekly during the transition period. You're experiencing what most operators experience when they transition from classified to conventional environments. Dr. Iraj, Chen explains during one session. People don't know how to categorize you. You don't fit their mental models of what a sailor should be. How do I make them comfortable with me? You don't. You be authentically yourself and let them adjust. The ones who can handle complexity will adapt. The ones who need simple categories will stay uncomfortable. That's their problem, not yours. Sarah also begins working with the medical department to document her TBI symptoms officially. For 2 years, she's been managing migraines, occasional sensory processing difficulties, and stress-related tremors without formal accommodation. Now, with Commander Reeves's intervention, she has access to proper treatment and workplace modifications. The neurologist who evaluates her is impressed by how well she's compensated for her injury. Most patients with this level of damage would have significant functional impairment. You've developed sophisticated coping mechanisms that allow you to perform at high levels, despite ongoing neurological compromise. I didn't have a choice, Sarah explains. I needed to prove I could still do my job. You proved it, but you shouldn't have had to prove it by hiding the injury and refusing treatment. The neurologist prescribes medication that helps with the migraines and refers Sarah to occupational therapy for additional coping strategies. 3 weeks after the mess hall incident, Sarah receives official orders. She's being transferred to the Center for Personal and Professional Development at Naval Station Great Lakes, where she'll work in the Resilience and Readiness Training Division. Her new role, developing and teaching curriculum for sailors, transitioning from high-stress operational environments to conventional duty. It's exactly the kind of assignment Sarah never knew she wanted. Before she transfers, Chief Warrant Officer Thomas calls her into his office one final time. "Martinez, I wanted to say something before you leave." Thomas looks uncomfortable, like he's trying to find words for something he's never had to articulate. "When you first reported to this command, I thought you were just another junior logistics specialist. Good at your job, but nothing exceptional. I was wrong. Sir, I tried to be just another logistics specialist. That was the whole point." "I know, and you succeeded. You were so good at being unremarkable that I completely missed that you were extraordinary." Thomas pauses. "I've been thinking about what that means, that you felt you had to hide your capabilities to be accepted. That says something problematic about our culture." Sarah appreciates the honesty. "It's getting better. Commander Reeves's work on operator reintegration is changing how the Navy handles people like me." "People like you shouldn't be a category that requires special handling. You should just be sailors whose skills are utilized appropriately." Thomas extends his hand. "Good luck at Great Lakes. They're getting someone special, even if you're going to keep trying to pretend you're not." Sarah shakes his hand, feeling genuine affection for the supervisor, who managed her for 18 months without knowing who she really was. Her last day at Naval Station Norfolk, Sarah returns to the mess hall where everything changed. She sits at the same corner table, her back to the wall, and eats her dinner while watching sailors move through the space. Some of them recognize her. She catches glances, whispered conversations, the occasional nod of acknowledgement, but mostly life has moved on. The viral video is old news, replaced by newer scandals and dramas. The mess hall has returned to being just a place where sailors eat, not the site of a 15-second confrontation that changed one person's carefully constructed life. Sarah thinks about Kowalski, Fisher, and the third recruit whose name she still doesn't know. She'd heard through unofficial channels that all three were counseled by their chain of command about appropriate behavior around female sailors. Kowalski was reportedly embarrassed enough by the incident that he requested transfer to a different command. She doesn't feel satisfaction about this outcome, doesn't feel vindicated, just feels tired. The exhaustion that comes from years of managing a complex identity that finally, forcibly, became integrated into something more honest. Her phone buzzes. A text from Rodriguez, one of the students she'll be teaching at Great Lakes. "Looking forward to your class on operational stress management. Heard you have real-world experience." Sarah smiles. Real-world experience. That's one way to describe 18 months attached to SEAL teams, followed by 2 years of pretending those 18 months never happened, culminating in 15 seconds that made the pretending impossible. She types her response. "Looking forward to meeting you. Fair warning, I don't teach from theory. Everything I teach I've lived." Over the next year, Sarah builds something she never expected, a career that utilizes both her operational experience and her logistics background, teaching sailors how to maintain effectiveness in imperfect conditions. Her classes focus on practical skills, recognizing operational stress before it becomes crisis, managing physical and psychological symptoms while maintaining mission focus, adapting to limitations without surrendering capability, reintegrating into conventional environments after high-stress assignments. The students are diverse. Some are operators transitioning from combat roles, Others are conventional sailors dealing with trauma from unexpected situations. Still others are trying to understand how to support colleagues who've experienced things they can't discuss. Sarah teaches by example. She's open about her TBI, about the symptoms she manages, about the adaptations she's developed. When she has a bad migraine day, she doesn't hide it. She teaches through it, demonstrating the techniques she uses to maintain function despite pain. This is what operational readiness actually looks like, she tells her students during one class where her tremors are particularly visible. Not perfect soldiers who never struggle, but capable people who've developed systems that work when they're not optimal. Because combat and life happen when you're tired, hurt, stressed, and barely holding it together. The feedback is extraordinary. Students report that Sarah's willingness to be vulnerable about her limitations while demonstrating continued competence gives them permission to acknowledge their own struggles. Her class becomes one of the highest-rated courses at the training center. 6 months into her new assignment, Sarah receives an unexpected visitor. Master Chief Rachel Morrison, no relation to Captain Morrison, appears at her office. Morrison is a legendary figure in Navy Special Operations, one of the first women to serve in combat support roles with SEAL teams. LS-1 Martinez, Morrison says, Sarah had been promoted to first-class petty officer based on Commander Reeves's recommendation and her exceptional work at the training center. I've been hearing about your classes. Mind if I sit in on one? Master Chief, it would be an honor. Morrison attends Sarah's afternoon session on managing cognitive impairment during high-stress operations. The class includes 12 students, 3 of whom have diagnosed TBIs from combat injuries. Sarah leads them through exercises in maintaining tactical decision-making despite sensory overload, managing complex calculations when processing speed is compromised, and recognizing when impairment has progressed to the point where backup is needed. After class, Morrison and Sarah walk along Lake Michigan, the Chicago skyline visible in the distance. That was the best training I've seen on this topic, Morrison says bluntly. You're teaching things that most senior leaders don't understand, that capability and impairment can coexist, that acknowledging limitations is strength rather than weakness. I'm teaching what I wish someone had taught me, Sarah replies. When I first sustained my TBI, I thought it meant my operational career was over. I spent 2 years hiding the injury and pretending I was fine. That was stupid and dangerous. If I can help other operators avoid that mistake, then maybe my injury serves some purpose. Morrison is quiet for a moment. I want to bring you to Dam Neck. We're developing a new program for SEAL operators managing post-deployment stress and injury. Your approach, honest about limitations, focused on adaptation rather than elimination. That's exactly what we need. Sarah feels her heart rate increase. Dam Neck is home to Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the most elite SEAL unit. The idea of working with operators at that level, teaching them methods she developed through her own struggle, is both terrifying and compelling. Master Chief, I'm not sure I'm qualified for that assignment. I was never a fully qualified SEAL. I was support personnel who received training because the mission required it. You're more qualified than you think. You've lived the challenge these operators face, trying to maintain capability while managing invisible injuries. You've developed solutions that work, and you can teach those solutions in ways that resonate because you're not theorizing. You're sharing what actually helped you. Sarah considers this. The old fear surfaces, that she's not good enough, not accomplished enough, not healed enough to work with elite operators. But underneath that fear is something new. Confidence earned through a year of successful teaching, of watching students transform their relationship with their own limitations, of proving that her experience has value beyond just surviving it. When would this start? 6 months. We're building the facility, developing the curriculum, recruiting instructors. I want you to be part of the core team. Morrison hands Sarah a card. Think about it. Talk to your therapist. Talk to Commander Reeves. But understand that what you're doing here matters enough that we want to expand it to the highest levels of special operations. That evening, Sarah calls Dr. Chen. I got offered an assignment at Dam Neck, teaching SEAL operators how to manage post-deployment stress and injury. How do you feel about that? Sarah has learned to recognize when Dr. Chen is asking a question that has multiple layers. It's not just about whether Sarah wants the assignment. It's about whether she's ready for the emotional complexity of working with operators who remind her of who she used to be, who she might have become if her injury hadn't redirected her path. Scared, excited, both. Sarah pauses. For a year, I've been teaching conventional sailors. This would be different. These are operators who've done things I never quite did, who have capabilities that exceed mine. I'm worried they won't respect me. Or you're worried they'll see through you and recognize that you're still struggling with your own limitations. Dr. Chen is right, as usual. Sarah's fear isn't really about the operator's judgment. It's about her own internalized belief that she's not fully healed, not completely functional, not quite enough. What if I teach them and then have a bad day? What if I'm mid-class and my symptoms flare and I can't finish the instruction? What if they see me struggling and lose confidence in the methods I'm teaching? Sarah, listen to yourself. You're describing the exact fear that keeps injured operators from seeking help. That acknowledging struggle means showing weakness. You've spent a year teaching people that's not true. Do you believe what you're teaching? Sarah sits with the question. Does she believe that capability and impairment can coexist? That acknowledging limitations is strength rather than weakness? That operators can maintain effectiveness while managing invisible injuries? I believe it for other people. I'm still learning to believe it for myself. Then this assignment is exactly what you need. Teaching elite operators will force you to claim your own authority, to trust that what you've learned through suffering has value, to model the integration you're trying to achieve. Dr. Chen's voice softens. You've spent 3 years hiding, then 1 year teaching. Maybe it's time to lead. Sarah accepts the assignment at Dam Neck. The 6 months before she transfers are intense. She completes additional training in trauma-informed instruction, advances her own therapy to address the anxieties that surface about working with elite operators, and develops curriculum specifically tailored to the unique stressors SEAL teams face. She also does something she hasn't done in 3 years. She returns to San Antonio to visit her parents. Her mother, Elena, opens the door and immediately pulls Sarah into a fierce hug. Mija, you should have come home sooner. Sarah's relationship with her parents has been complicated since her SEAL attachment. She couldn't explain where she was going or what she was doing, just that she'd been selected for a classified assignment that required training she couldn't discuss. When she returned with a TBI and transferred to conventional logistics, she told them she'd been injured during routine operations. They believed her because they trusted her, but she knows they've sensed the gaps in her story, the things she's not saying. Over dinner, her mother's pozole, made exactly the way Sarah remembers from childhood, her father Manuel asks the question he's been holding for 3 years. Sarah, what really happened to you? Sarah sets down her spoon. She's thought about this conversation many times, rehearsed various versions of it with Dr. Chen. The truth is classified, but the emotional truth is shareable. I did things in the military that I can't talk about. I trained for things I can't describe. I was injured during an operation I can't explain. Sarah meets her father's eyes, but the core of it is this. I volunteered for a difficult assignment because I wanted to prove I was more than people expected. I succeeded at that assignment, and the success cost me, physically, psychologically. I've spent 3 years learning to live with that cost. Her mother reaches across the table and takes Sarah's hand. Are you happy now? It's such a simple question, such an impossible question. I'm better than I was. I'm teaching others how to manage what I struggled with. I'm using what happened to me in ways that help people. Sarah pauses. I don't know if that's happiness, but it feels like purpose. And purpose is enough. They talk late into the night, Sarah sharing what she can about her new assignment, her parents telling her about the neighborhood changes, the family gossip, the normal life that continued while Sarah was living an abnormal one. When Sarah leaves San Antonio 3 days later, she feels more integrated than she has in years. The scared 20-year-old who left for boot camp, the hidden operator who couldn't share her experiences, and the wounded sailor trying to rebuild her life, all of these versions of Sarah are starting to coexist rather than conflict. Sarah's first day at Dam Neck, she reports to the Special Operations Resilience and Readiness Center, a newly constructed facility designed specifically for the program Master Chief Morrison is building. The center includes training rooms, medical evaluation spaces, therapy offices, and a gym equipped for adaptive physical training. Morrison greets her at the entrance. LS-1 Martinez, welcome. Let me show you what we've built. The facility is impressive. Not luxurious. Military training environments never are. But thoughtfully designed with input from operators who've lived with post-deployment stress and injury. The lighting is adjustable to accommodate those with sensory sensitivities. The training rooms have excellent acoustics to minimize auditory triggers. The therapy spaces are configured to feel secure rather than clinical. This is what the Navy should have provided years ago, Morrison says as they tour the spaces. Support for operators dealing with invisible injuries. Recognition that the mission doesn't end when you come home. It just changes form. Sarah meets the other instructors, a mix of active duty operators with managed injuries, retired SEALs who've successfully navigated the transition to civilian life, and civilian specialists in trauma and resilience. She's the youngest and the only one who's not a fully qualified SEAL, which triggers her insecurities. But Morrison addresses this directly during their first team meeting. LS-1 Martinez brings something we don't have. Experience successfully reintegrating into conventional duty while managing combat injury. Most operators either stay in special operations until they can't anymore, or they separate entirely. Martinez found a third path. That's what we need to teach. The program's first class arrives 2 weeks later. 12 SEAL operators, all managing various combinations of TBI, PTSD, chronic pain, and operational stress injuries. They range in age from mid-20s to early 40s. All of them have distinguished service records. All of them are struggling with the gap between who they were before injury and who they've become after. Sarah teaches her first class on cognitive adaptation strategies. She's nervous. These are operators whose capabilities exceed hers, whose combat experience dwarfs what she's done. But as she begins teaching, something shifts. These operators don't care that she wasn't a fully qualified SEAL. They care that she understands what they're experiencing, that she has practical tools that actually work, that she's honest about her own limitations while demonstrating continued effectiveness. I have a TBI, Sarah tells them during the first session. I get migraines that can make me non-functional for hours. I have tremors when I'm stressed. My processing speed is slower than it used to be. All of these things are permanent, but I've learned to build systems that work around these limitations. That's what I'm going to teach you. Not how to eliminate your injuries, but how to integrate them into continued capability. One of the operators, a senior chief named Davidson, raises his hand. Ma'am, no disrespect, but teaching is different from operational work. How do we know these strategies work in actual mission environments? It's a fair question. Sarah had anticipated it. You're right that my current work is teaching, but these strategies were developed and tested during my operational assignment. I can't discuss the specific missions, but I can tell you that I performed precision tasks while managing TBI symptoms in high-stress combat environments. The methods I'm teaching aren't theoretical. They're what kept me functional when optimal performance wasn't possible. Davidson nods, satisfied with this answer. Over the 8-week course, Sarah watches these operators transform their relationship with their injuries. They come in believing that injury means the end of capability. They leave understanding that injury requires adaptation, but doesn't eliminate effectiveness. The breakthrough moment for Sarah comes during week 6. She's teaching a session on managing panic symptoms during operational stress when her own panic attack triggers, environmental factors combining with sleep deprivation, to create the perfect storm of TBI and PTSD symptoms colliding. She could hide it, could push through and maintain the facade of perfect control, but that would contradict everything she's teaching. Instead, she stops mid-sentence. I need to pause. I'm having a panic attack. This is what it looks like when my symptoms are activated. Watch what I do. She sits down, implements the breathing techniques Dr. Chen taught her, uses grounding exercises to reconnect with the present moment. The 12 operators watch in silence as Sarah works through the attack, demonstrating in real time the methods she's been teaching theoretically. After 5 minutes, Sarah's breathing normalizes. She stands. That's what management looks like. Not elimination. Management. I still had the panic attack, but I had tools to work through it without losing function entirely. That's what I'm teaching you to do with your own symptoms. After class, Senior Chief Davidson approaches her. Ma'am, that took courage. Showing weakness in front of operators you're trying to teach. Sarah meets his eyes. It's not weakness, Senior Chief. It's honesty. And if I can't model the integration I'm teaching, then I'm just another instructor selling theory instead of reality. Davidson nods slowly. You're right, and for what it's worth, that demonstration taught us more than any lecture could have. The first-class graduates with exceptional evaluations. All 12 operators report improved symptom management, better understanding of their limitations, and, most importantly, renewed confidence in their ability to contribute despite their injuries. Master Chief Morrison reviews the results with satisfaction. This is exactly what the SEAL community needs. We're expanding the program, 3 more classes over the next year, and we're developing an instructor training pipeline so we can replicate this across Naval Special Warfare. Sarah is promoted to Chief Petty Officer based on her exceptional work. The promotion comes with additional responsibilities. She's now the lead curriculum developer for the Resilience program, training other instructors in her methods, and serving as an advisor to Spec Warcom on policies regarding injured operator retention and reintegration. 2 years after the mess hall incident that destroyed her cover, Sarah stands in front of a conference room full of Navy admirals and senior enlisted leaders. She's been invited to present her program's results to the Chief of Naval Operations as part of a force-wide assessment of mental health and resilience initiatives. The presentation is professional, data-driven, compelling. Sarah shows reduction in symptom severity among program graduates, improved retention rates for injured operators, increased mission readiness scores. The numbers tell a clear story. Investing in injured operators' continued development rather than separating them produces better outcomes for both the individuals and the force. But at the end of her formal presentation, the CNO asks a personal question. Chief Martinez, I've read your service record. I know about your SEAL attachment, your TBI, your transition back to conventional duty. Tell me, personally, not professionally, was it worth it? Sarah considers the question carefully. It's the same question she's asked herself hundreds of times over the past 4 years. Sir, I volunteered for an assignment that changed me permanently. I sustained an injury that will affect me for the rest of my life. I spent 2 years hiding who I was because I was afraid my injury would define me. And then I spent 2 more years learning that my injury doesn't define me. My adaptation does. She pauses, gathering her thoughts. Was it worth it? I don't know if that's the right question. The right question is, given that it happened, given that I was injured in service to a mission I believed in, what am I going to do with that experience? And my answer is, I'm going to use what I learned to help other operators avoid the mistakes I made. I'm going to teach them that injury and capability can coexist. I'm going to build programs that support rather than separate injured sailors. The CNO nods slowly. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need at senior levels. Have you considered applying for officer programs? Sarah is surprised by the question. She'd never considered becoming an officer. Her career path has been focused on teaching and program development, not command. Sir, I'm not sure I'm qualified for commissioning programs. Chief, you've built a program from nothing that's changing how Naval Special Warfare handles injured operators. You're teaching some of our most elite personnel how to maintain effectiveness despite impairment. You're advising senior leaders on policy. Those are officer-level responsibilities. The only thing missing is the commission. After the briefing, Master Chief Morrison walks with Sarah back to her office. He's right, you know. You're operating at levels that exceed your current rank. You should consider Officer Candidate School or one of the limited duty officer programs. Sarah has mixed feelings about this suggestion. Part of her is honored by the recognition. Part of her worries that becoming an officer would distance her from the enlisted operators she's most effective teaching. I need to think about it, Master Chief. Think fast. The Navy doesn't often offer second chances at career advancement. That evening, Sarah calls Dr. Chen to discuss the CNO's suggestion. How do you feel about becoming an officer? Terrified, inadequate, like I'd be pretending to be something I'm not, all over again. Sarah pauses, but also interested. The program is growing. If I stay enlisted, I'll hit a ceiling on how much influence I can have. As an officer, I could expand the work to the entire fleet. So the question isn't whether you're qualified. You've proven that repeatedly. The question is whether you're willing to claim authority that matches your actual capabilities. Sarah sits with this insight. For years, she's been operating in roles that understate her skills. Logistics specialist with SEAL training, instructor who's more capable than her students realize, program developer who's changing policy at levels above her rank, always effective, always competent, but always slightly hidden. Becoming an officer would require claiming her full capabilities openly. No more hiding, no more minimizing, no more operating in roles that don't match her actual skill level. "I'm afraid I'll fail," Sarah admits. "You've been afraid you'll fail at every major transition in your career. You've succeeded at all of them." Dr. Chen's voice is gentle but firm. "At some point, Sarah, you need to trust your track record rather than your anxiety." Sarah applies for the Limited Duty Officer program, specializing in special operations training and education. Her application is competitive. Distinguished service record, classified operational experience, proven program development skills, strong endorsements from Commander Reeves and Master Chief Morrison. 6 months later, Sarah stands in her dress blues as she's commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. Her parents are present for the ceremony, finally allowed to see a fuller picture of what their daughter has become. Commander Reeves administers the oath. "I, Sarah Martinez, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same." As Sarah speaks the words, she thinks about the journey that brought her here. The eager 20-year-old recruit who wanted to prove herself, the hidden operator who couldn't share her experiences, the injured sailor who spent 2 years pretending to be fine, the instructor who learned to teach through her own limitations, and now, the officer who's been given authority to expand programs that help others navigate similar journeys. After the ceremony, Senior Chief Davidson, one of Sarah's first students, approaches her. "Congratulations, ma'am, though it's going to be weird calling you that instead of Chief. You can still call me Sarah in private." "Not anymore. You're an officer now. Fraternization rules apply." He grins. "But I wanted you to know. What you taught me saved my career, maybe saved my life. I was about to separate because I thought my TBI meant I was done. Your class showed me I could adapt. 2 years later, I'm still operational, still contributing. That's because of what you taught me." Sarah feels tears threatening and blinks them back. "You did the work, Senior Chief. I just gave you tools. You gave us more than tools. You gave us permission to be honest about our limitations." In the SEAL community, that's revolutionary. Over the next 3 years, Ensign Martinez, promoted to lieutenant junior grade and then lieutenant, expands the resilience program across Naval Special Warfare. What started as one 8-week course at Dam Neck becomes a comprehensive support system for operators at every stage of their careers. She develops pre-deployment training that teaches proactive stress management. She creates peer support networks where operators can connect with others managing similar injuries. She advocates for policy changes that reduce stigma around seeking mental health treatment. Most importantly, she continues teaching. Even as her rank and responsibilities increase, Sarah maintains direct contact with operators going through the program. She tells her story. The classified parts remain classified, but the emotional journey of injury, hiding, revelation, and integration becomes a teaching tool that resonates with operators facing similar challenges. The program's success attracts attention beyond Naval Special Warfare. The Army Special Operations Command requests Sarah's assistance in developing similar initiatives. The Air Force wants to adapt her methods for combat controllers and para-rescue men. The Marine Corps is interested in applying her approach to force reconnaissance units. 5 years after the mess hall incident, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez briefs the Senate Armed Services Committee on military mental health and resilience initiatives. It's the culmination of a journey she never imagined when 4 sailors thought they could intimidate her because of her uniform, her gender, her appearance. Senator Thompson, chair of the committee, asks the question that ties everything together. "Lieutenant Martinez, you've built one of the most successful operator resilience programs in the Department of Defense. What would you say to young service members, particularly women, who are considering special operations careers but worry about the physical and psychological costs?" Sarah thinks about her 20-year-old self, eager and naive. She thinks about the 18 months attached to SEAL teams, the injury that changed everything, the 2 years of hiding, the viral video that forced integration. "Senator, I would tell them that special operations will change you. It will push you beyond limits you didn't know you had. It will give you capabilities you never imagined. And yes, it might break something inside you, physically or psychologically, or both. She pauses, aware that her next words will be quoted, analyzed, potentially used to either encourage or discourage women from pursuing these paths. But I would also tell them that being broken doesn't mean being useless. Being changed doesn't mean being less. Having limitations doesn't eliminate capability. The question isn't whether you'll be damaged by the work. You probably will be. The question is whether you'll have the support and tools to integrate that damage into continued effectiveness. And does the military provide that support? It's getting better. 5 years ago, when I was injured, the system wanted to separate me. They saw my TBI as disqualifying rather than as an injury sustained in service that required accommodation. Today, because of programs like the one I've developed, we're doing better. We're retaining operators with invisible injuries. We're teaching adaptation rather than demanding elimination of symptoms. We're building a culture where seeking help is seen as strength rather than weakness. Sarah looks directly at the committee members. We still have work to do. Injured operators, particularly women, still face bias and skepticism. But the trajectory is positive, and I'm proof that you can be injured in service, struggle with that injury, and eventually use that struggle to contribute in ways you never expected. After the hearing, Sarah is approached by a young woman in Navy uniform, an ensign freshly commissioned with the eager intensity Sarah recognizes from her own younger self. "Ma'am, I'm Ensign Jessica Rodriguez. I just got selected for Bud S." The woman's voice carries both excitement and fear. "I watched your testimony. I wanted to ask, was it worth it? All of it?" Sarah has been asked this question hundreds of times in different forms, by operators struggling with injuries, by commanders wondering whether to retain damaged sailors, by her own reflection in moments of doubt. But standing in the Senate office building, talking to a young woman about to undertake the brutal selection process for SEAL training, Sarah finally has an answer that feels complete. "Ensign, I can't tell you if it will be worth it for you. I can only tell you what I've learned." Sarah gestures to a quieter corner of the hallway. "I volunteered for special operations because I wanted to prove something. To myself, to my family, to everyone who underestimated me because of my size or gender. I succeeded. I did things I'm not allowed to talk about in places I can't name. And it cost me." She touches her temple briefly, acknowledging the injury that shaped the past 5 years. "I sustained a TBI during my last operation. For 2 years, I hid that injury because I was afraid it would define me. I pretended to be fine while managing symptoms that made every day harder. And then one night, 4 sailors pushed me too far, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Everything I'd been hiding became public." Rodriguez listens intently, and Sarah can see the young officer processing what this means for her own future. "But here's what I learned. The injury didn't define me. My response to the injury defined me. I could have accepted medical separation, could have walked away and built a civilian life. Instead, I chose to stay, to teach, to use what I learned through suffering to help others. That choice, to transform struggle into service, that's what made the cost worth it." Sarah pauses, making sure Rodriguez understands the full weight of what she's saying. "So if you're asking me whether you should pursue Bud S, whether you should risk everything for a chance at special operations, I can't answer that. But I can tell you that if you do it, if you succeed and if it breaks something inside you, there's a path forward. There's a way to integrate the damage into continued purpose. You won't be alone." Rodriguez nods slowly, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you, ma'am. That's exactly what I needed to hear." As the ensign walks away, Sarah feels the familiar weight of responsibility. Every operator she teaches, every student who hears her story, every young sailor inspired by her testimony, they're all making life-changing decisions partially based on what Sarah represents. The pressure to be a perfect example, to justify their choices through her own success, is substantial. Her phone buzzes. A text from Dr. Chen. "Watched your testimony on C-SPAN. Proud of you. But also, are you taking care of yourself?" That level of visibility and responsibility can be triggering. Sarah appreciates the check-in. Dr. Chen has been with her through every major transition of the past 5 years, providing the psychological support that made adaptation possible. She types her response. "Manageable stress. Some anxiety about being held up as an example when I still have bad days. But overall good. Can we schedule a session next week to process the Senate experience? Chen's reply is immediate. Already on your calendar for Tuesday. And Sarah? Having bad days doesn't disqualify you from being an example. It makes you an honest example. That's more valuable. 3 months after her Senate testimony, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stands in the training facility at Dam Neck, watching a class of 12 operators work through adaptive physical training exercises. These aren't the elite athletes who entered SEAL training. These are operators managing various injuries and impairments, learning to maintain physical capability despite bodies that no longer function optimally. One operator, a senior chief named Marcus Webb, is working through shooting drills with significant modifications. He lost partial function in his right hand during an operation in Syria, nerve damage that ended his career in a SEAL platoon, but not his desire to serve. Under the Resilience Program's framework, he's being trained as an instructor, teaching other operators how to adapt their techniques to physical limitations. Sarah watches Webb execute a modified shooting stance, his grip adjusted to compensate for the nerve damage. The shot placement is excellent, not despite his injury, but because he's developed sophisticated compensations that actually enhance certain aspects of his performance. Senior Chief, that's textbook adaptation, Sarah calls out. Show the others the hand position. Webb demonstrates for the class, explaining the biomechanics of his modified grip. When I first sustained this injury, I thought my shooting career was over. Couldn't maintain proper grip, couldn't manage recoil. But Lieutenant Martinez, taught me that limitations require innovation. I can't shoot the way I used to, but I can shoot differently, and differently can be just as effective. This is the core philosophy Sarah has built into every aspect of the program. Adaptation over elimination, innovation over tradition, effectiveness over conformity to outdated standards. After class, Sarah meets with Master Chief Morrison to review program expansion plans. We're getting requests from SOCOM to export this model to all special operations branches, Morrison says, pulling up a presentation on her office screen. Army Special Forces wants it. Air Force Special Operations Command is interested. Marine Raiders are requesting consultation. You've built something that transcends Navy Special Warfare. Sarah feels the familiar mixture of pride and inadequacy. Master Chief, I built this for a specific population. Naval Special Warfare operators managing post-deployment stress and injury. I'm not sure it translates to other communities without significant modification. That's why you'd be leading the expansion. Your experience gives you credibility across communities. An operator with combat injury who's successfully adapted, that resonates regardless of service branch. Morrison leans forward. They're creating a new billet at SOCOM headquarters. Director of Special Operations Resilience and Readiness. Lieutenant Commander position. They want you, Lieutenant Commander. The next promotion in Sarah's officer career, coming faster than traditional timelines because of the unique value of her program. But also a step into bureaucracy and policy making that would take her further from direct teaching. What about the hands-on work? The teaching, the direct contact with operators. You'd still teach, maybe 1 class per quarter to maintain proficiency. But most of your time would be spent building policy, training instructors, expanding the program across the joint force. Morrison's expression is serious. Sarah, you can teach 12 operators at a time in a classroom. Or you can build systems that help thousands of operators across all branches. Both matter, but one has exponentially more impact. Sarah knows Morrison is right, but she also knows that teaching, the direct human connection with operators struggling through their own integration, is what makes the work meaningful for her. Can I think about it? You have 2 weeks. SOCOM wants someone in the position by next quarter. That evening, Sarah runs along the beach near Dam Neck, the physical exertion helping her process the decision. The TBI makes running more difficult than it used to be. Her balance is slightly off, her coordination not quite what it was. But she's adapted, just like she teaches her students to adapt. Shorter stride, more focus on form. Acceptance that her pace will never be what it was before the injury. Her phone rings mid-run. Commander Reeves. Martinez, I heard about the SOCOM offer. What are you thinking? Sarah slows to a walk, catching her breath. Thinking that I'm not sure I want to be a bureaucrat. I became an officer to expand the teaching, not to disappear into policymaking. You're thinking about it wrong. Policymaking isn't separate from teaching. It's teaching at scale. Every directive you write, every training requirement you establish, every accommodation you build into the system, that's teaching thousands of operators you'll never meet directly. But it's impersonal. I won't see their faces when they have breakthroughs, won't know if what I'm building actually helps. Reeves is quiet for a moment. Sarah, do you remember what you told me 5 years ago? After the mess hall incident, when you were terrified that your cover was blown. I told you I didn't want special treatment. I just wanted to be honest about my limitations. You said you wanted to prove you could function in conventional duty despite your previous training and your injury. You've proven that, repeatedly. Now it's time for the next evolution, using your position to change the system that almost discarded you. Sarah knows Reeves is right. She's been preparing for this transition without realizing it. Every class taught, every operator mentored, every policy recommendation written. The lieutenant commander position at SOCOM is the logical next step, but logical doesn't make it emotionally easy. What if I fail? What if I build policy that sounds good on paper but doesn't actually help operators in the field? Then you'll adjust, adapt, and improve. You know, the same process you teach your students. Reeves pauses. Sarah, you're ready for this. Stop waiting for permission to claim the authority you've already earned. Sarah accepts the position. The transition to SOCOM headquarters in Tampa is both exciting and disorienting. She goes from directly teaching operators to coordinating programs across 5 service branches. Her office is in a building far from training facilities, surrounded by policy analysts and program managers, rather than the instructors and students she spent 5 years working with. The first few months are brutal. Sarah struggles with the bureaucratic complexity, the endless meetings, the slowness of institutional change. She misses the immediate feedback of teaching, the moment when an operator's eyes light up with understanding, the tangible progress of watching someone transform their relationship with their injury. But gradually, she begins to see the impact of her new role. She writes policy requiring all special operations units to implement pre-deployment resilience training. She establishes standards for accommodating operators with managed injuries. She creates career pathways for operators who can't return to operational roles, but retain valuable expertise. Each policy change represents hundreds of operators who will have an easier path than Sarah did. Each accommodation built into the system represents someone who won't have to fight as hard to stay in service despite injury. Each training requirement represents knowledge being systematically shared rather than individually discovered through struggle. 6 months into the SOCOM position, Sarah receives an email from Ensign Rodriguez, the young woman who'd approached her after the Senate testimony. The subject line reads, "Update from Bud S. Ma'am, I made it through Hell Week. I'm writing this from the medical tent because I'm pretty sure I have stress fractures in both feet, but I made it. Out of 180 students who started, 42 of us are still here. I'm one of 3 women. I wanted you to know because you're part of why I didn't quit. During the worst moments, when my body was screaming at me to stop, when the instructors were yelling that I didn't belong, when I couldn't remember why I thought I could do this, I remembered what you said, about injury not defining you, about adaptation being strength, about using struggle to serve. I don't know if I'll make it through the rest of training, but I made it through Hell Week, and that's something I wasn't sure I could do. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Respectfully, ENS Rodriguez." Sarah reads the email 3 times, feeling emotion well up that she doesn't quite know how to name. Pride in Rodriguez's accomplishment, recognition of her younger self in the ensign's determination, and something deeper, the understanding that her own struggle has created pathways for others that didn't exist before. She responds, "Ensign Rodriguez, congratulations on Hell Week. That's an extraordinary accomplishment, and you should be proud regardless of what comes next. But I need you to understand something. Stress fractures are serious. Don't minimize them. Don't push through them without proper treatment. The culture of special operations often encourages ignoring injury, but that's how small problems become permanent damage. I'm speaking from experience. The TBI that shaped my past 5 years started as symptoms I ignored because I wanted to prove I could handle anything. That decision cost me. Don't make the same mistake. Get medical attention, follow treatment protocols, and know that taking care of your injury doesn't make you weak, it makes you smart. Proud of you, LCDR Martinez. 1 year into her SOCOM position, Lieutenant Commander Martinez is promoted to Commander, an accelerated timeline that reflects the exceptional impact of her work. The promotion ceremony is attended by operators from all branches who've gone through her programs, creating an unusual gathering of SEALs, Green Berets, Raiders, and Air Force Special Tactics personnel in one space. Master Chief Morrison, now retired but present for the ceremony, pins on Sarah's new rank insignia. 5 years ago, you were a logistics specialist trying to hide who you really were. Today, you're a commander changing how the entire special operations community thinks about injury and resilience. That's not just career progression, that's transformation. After the ceremony, Sarah is approached by a civilian she doesn't immediately recognize, a woman in her 60s with the bearing of someone who's spent a lifetime in demanding environments. Commander Martinez, I'm Dr. Susan Whitman. I worked with the Navy's first female surface warfare officers in the 1990s, helping them navigate integration into previously all-male communities. Sarah recognizes the name. Whitman is legendary in Navy circles for her work on gender integration and organizational change. Ma'am, it's an honor. Your work made it possible for women like me to serve in roles that weren't even imaginable when you started. Whitman smiles. And your work is doing the same thing for the next generation. But I wanted to talk to you about something specific, the way you've integrated your injury into your professional identity. They find a quiet corner away from the post-ceremony reception. When I worked with the first female SWOs, they faced enormous pressure to be perfect, Whitman explains. To never show weakness, never admit struggle, never acknowledge that the integration process was difficult, because any sign of difficulty would be used as evidence that women didn't belong. Does that sound familiar? Sarah nods. That's exactly how I felt for the first 2 years after my injury. I couldn't admit I was struggling because struggling would be seen as proof that female operators with combat injuries were too complicated to accommodate. But you eventually did admit it. You made your injury visible, made your adaptation process transparent. That was courageous. And it's changing something fundamental about how the military thinks about capability. Whitman leans forward, her expression intense. For decades, military culture has conflated capability with invulnerability. The idea that a good service member never struggles, never fails, never shows limitation. But you're teaching something different, that capability can coexist with vulnerability, that strength can include acknowledging weakness, that the most effective operators might be those who've learned to function despite significant impairment. I'm just teaching what I had to learn to survive, Sarah says. Exactly, and that's what makes it powerful. You're not theorizing about resilience from a position of unbroken strength. You're demonstrating it from a position of acknowledged limitation. That gives permission for others to do the same. Whitman hands Sarah a card. I'm working on a book about organizational culture change in the military. I'd like to interview you about your experience, not just the programs you've built, but the personal journey that informed them. Your story matters beyond just special operations. Sarah accepts the card, uncertain. Ma'am, I'm not sure my story is that significant. I'm just one operator who got injured and figured out how to keep serving. You're an operator who got injured, spent 2 years hiding it, had your cover spectacularly blown, and then used that forced revelation to build programs that are changing policy across the entire DoD. That's not just anything. That's leadership through vulnerability, which is something the military desperately needs more of. Over the next several months, Sarah participates in multiple interviews with Dr. Whitman, discussing not just the policy work, but the emotional journey, the shame of injury, the fear of being discovered, the relief when hiding became impossible, the gradual process of integrating her fractured identities into something more coherent. The book, when it's published 18 months later, is titled Strength Through Scars: How Vulnerability is Changing Military Leadership. Sarah's story comprises one of 5 case studies examining service members who've transformed personal struggle into organizational innovation. The book receives significant attention in military and veteran circles. Sarah does several interviews, always carefully, always aware that her story represents not just her own experience, but the thousands of operators managing similar challenges. During one interview with a military podcast, the host asks the inevitable question, "Commander, 5 years ago you were trying to be invisible. Now you're very visible, testifying to Congress, featured in books, serving at senior levels. How does that feel? Sarah has learned to answer this question honestly. It feels necessary. If I stayed invisible, if I kept hiding my injury and my adaptation, I'd be perpetuating the culture that made my own reintegration so difficult. By being visible, by showing that injury and leadership can coexist, I'm trying to make the path easier for the operators who come after me. But is it uncomfortable? Extremely. I'd much rather teach in a classroom where I can have direct impact without the scrutiny of public visibility. But the reality is that systemic change requires visible examples. People need to see that commanders can have TBIs, that senior leaders can manage PTSD, that capability doesn't require being unbroken. The podcast host pauses before asking the next question. There's been criticism from some quarters that the military is becoming too soft, too willing to accommodate limitation, rather than demanding excellence. How do you respond to that? Sarah has heard this criticism repeatedly, usually from older veterans who served in eras when acknowledging injury meant automatic separation. I'd respond by asking what excellence actually means. If excellence means operating at optimal capacity with no limitations, then very few service members would qualify, especially after deployment. But if excellence means accomplishing the mission despite imperfect conditions, then accommodating injury while maintaining capability is exactly what we should be doing. She continues, warming to the topic. I've trained operators who, by traditional standards, shouldn't still be serving. Chronic pain, TBI, PTSD, physical injuries that limit mobility. But these same operators have valuable expertise, proven judgment, and, most importantly, they've learned to function effectively in degraded states. That's a crucial capability in extended operations, where everyone is tired, hurt, and operating below optimal. So you're saying injured operators might actually be more valuable than uninjured ones? I'm saying that operators who've learned to maintain effectiveness despite injury have developed skills that are valuable for the entire force. Not because injury is good, it's not, but because the adaptation process teaches resilience that can't be learned any other way. 2 years after accepting the SOCOM position, Commander Martinez is selected for captain, a rank normally achieved after 20 years of service, but reached by Sarah in 12, reflecting the exceptional value of her contributions. The promotion also comes with a new assignment. She's being designated as the Navy's lead for all resilience and readiness programs, not just special operations. Her mandate is to take the lessons learned from working with elite operators and apply them across the entire fleet. It's a massive expansion of scope. Sarah will be responsible for programs affecting hundreds of thousands of sailors rather than the specialized community of special operations personnel she's worked with for the past 7 years. The first challenge is resistance from conventional Navy leadership who don't understand why lessons from special operations should apply to surface fleet sailors, submariners, or aviators. Captain Martinez addresses this directly in her first briefing to the Navy's Senior Leadership Council. The assumption is that special operations operators face unique stresses that don't apply to conventional forces. That's partially true. The intensity of direct action missions is different from routine naval operations. But the core challenge is the same. How do you maintain human performance in demanding conditions over extended periods? She pulls up data on the screen. Rates of mental health diagnoses, substance abuse, suicide, and retention problems across all Navy communities. These numbers tell us that stress, injury, and burnout aren't special operations problems. They're Navy-wide problems. Surface sailors dealing with the operational tempo of continuous deployments. Submariners managing the psychological pressure of extended underwater operations. Aviators handling the cognitive demands of complex flight operations while managing family separation. Sarah advances to the next slide, showing outcomes from resilience programs implemented in special warfare communities. When we teach proactive stress management, when we reduce stigma around seeking help, when we build adaptive systems that function despite human limitation, we see dramatic improvements. Lower mental health crisis rates, better retention of experienced personnel, increased mission readiness because sailors are actually dealing with their challenges rather than hiding them until they become crises. A rear admiral interrupts. Captain, special operations personnel are self-selected, highly motivated, exceptional individuals. Of course, they respond well to resilience training. But the average sailor, they're not operating at that level. Sarah recognizes the bias in this statement, the assumption that only elite personnel can benefit from sophisticated psychological support. She responds carefully but firmly. Admiral, with respect, I disagree with the premise. Resilience isn't an elite skill, it's a human skill. Every sailor who deploys faces stress. Every sailor who gets injured faces adaptation challenges. Every sailor who experiences trauma needs tools to process it. The specific stressors might differ, but the fundamental human responses don't. She shares a personal example to illustrate the point. When I sustained my TBI, I wasn't in a special operations billet anymore. I was working standard logistics duty. The stress of managing my symptoms while pretending to be fine, that would have been exactly the same whether I was in spec war or on a destroyer. The stigma around admitting I needed help, that exists across all communities. The fear that seeking treatment would end my career, universal. The room is quiet as senior officers process this perspective. What I'm proposing isn't importing special operations culture Navy-wide. It's recognizing that all sailors are human. All humans have limitations, and building systems that support humans functioning effectively despite those limitations. That's not softness, that's smart force management. The briefing results in approval to pilot resilience programs in 3 conventional Navy communities: a destroyer squadron, a submarine squadron, and a carrier air wing. Sarah will have 1 year to demonstrate that her methods work outside the special operations environment. The next year is intense. Sarah splits her time between developing fleet-wide policy and personally visiting the 3 pilot communities to train instructors and refine curriculum for conventional sailors. She learns quickly that teaching resilience to conventional forces requires different approaches than working with special operations personnel. Conventional sailors have less autonomy, less control over their schedules, and often less support from their chains of command for prioritizing personal well-being. But the core principles remain the same: honest acknowledgement of limitations, proactive management of stress, building systems that function despite imperfection. The results after 1 year exceed expectations. The 3 pilot communities show 34% reduction in mental health crises, 28% improvement in retention of experienced sailors, 19% reduction in disciplinary incidents, significant improvement in crew cohesion and command climate scores. The data is compelling enough that the Chief of Naval Operations directs fleet-wide implementation of resilience training based on Captain Martinez's model. At 42 years old, 14 years after enlisting as an eager 20-year-old from San Antonio, Captain Sarah Martinez stands in the Pentagon briefing the Secretary of the Navy on the resilience program's expansion. Ma'am, we're implementing this training in 3 phases. Phase 1 focuses on pre-deployment preparation, teaching sailors proactive stress management before they face high-stress environments. Phase 2 addresses in-theater support, giving commanders tools to identify and intervene when sailors are struggling. Phase 3 handles post-deployment reintegration, the transition back to routine that often triggers delayed psychological responses. The Secretary listens carefully before asking, "Captain, I've read your personal story. The TBI, the years of hiding it, the transformation from injured sailor to senior leader. How much of this program is shaped by your personal experience?" Sarah doesn't hesitate. "All of it, ma'am. Every aspect of this program emerged from what I learned the hard way. That hiding injury makes it worse. That asking for help requires more courage than suffering in silence. That leaders who acknowledge their own limitations create permission for others to do the same. Do you still manage symptoms from your injury?" It's a direct question that Sarah could deflect with general statements about being medically cleared for duty. Instead, she chooses honesty. "Yes, ma'am. I have chronic migraines that I manage with medication. I have sensory processing challenges in certain environments. My cognitive processing speed is slower than it was before the injury. I've adapted to these limitations through the same techniques I teach in the resilience program." "And you believe that visible leadership despite injury is important?" "I believe it's essential. If senior leaders only acknowledge limitation after retirement, We perpetuate the myth that successful service members never struggle. But if leaders are honest about managing challenges while remaining effective, we normalize seeking help and build a healthier force culture. The secretary nods slowly. I agree, which is why I'm making a decision that might surprise you. She hands Sarah a folder. I'm nominating you for Rear Admiral. The promotion board meets in 3 months. If selected, you'd be one of the Navy's youngest flag officers and one of very few who's publicly discussed managing service-connected disability while serving at senior levels. Sarah opens the folder, seeing the nomination paperwork inside. Rear Admiral, a rank she never imagined achieving, a level of leadership that would give her unprecedented authority to shape Navy culture. Ma'am, I'm honored, but I need to be direct about something. My symptoms aren't static. I have bad days where I'm barely functional. If I'm promoted to flag rank, those days will be more visible, more subject to scrutiny. I know, and I'm nominating you anyway. The secretary's expression is serious. The Navy needs leaders who model resilience rather than invulnerability, who demonstrate that limitation and capability can coexist, who show junior sailors that struggling doesn't disqualify you from success. 3 months later, Captain Sarah Martinez receives word that she's been selected for Rear Admiral. The promotion comes with assignment as the Navy's first flag officer for personnel resilience and readiness, a newly created position that elevates the work she's been doing to the highest levels of Navy leadership. The promotion ceremony takes place at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Sarah's parents fly in from San Antonio, her father now retired, her mother still working as a school teacher. They've watched their daughter's career with pride mixed with confusion, never fully understanding the classified portions of her service, but recognizing that Sarah has become someone significant. As Admiral Patricia Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, though the coincidence has provided years of jokes, pins on Sarah's first star, she speaks briefly. 22 years ago, a young woman from San Antonio enlisted in the Navy, hoping to prove herself. Today, she becomes one of our most junior admirals and one of our most important leaders. That journey, from enlisted sailor to flag officer, from injured operator to architect of resilience, represents the very best of what our Navy can be. After the ceremony, Sarah finds a quiet moment with her parents. Her mother, Elena, touches Sarah's new rank insignia gently. I still don't understand everything you've done, mija, but I'm so proud of who you've become. Her father, Manuel, is more direct. You could have quit a dozen times. After the injury, after they tried to push you out, when it got too hard. Why didn't you? Sarah considers the question. Because quitting would have meant accepting that injury defined my worth. I couldn't do that, and once I realized I could keep serving despite my limitations, I had to help others do the same. The work became bigger than just my own survival. That evening, Sarah hosts a small reception for the people who made her journey possible. Commander Reeves, now retired. Master Chief Morrison, also retired. Dr. Chen, still working with operators managing combat stress. Chief Warrant Officer Thomas, who supervised her during those difficult 2 years of hiding, and dozens of operators she's taught or mentored over the past decade. Senior Chief Davidson, one of her first students, now retired and working as a civilian resilience instructor, gives a toast. 10 years ago, I thought my career was over. TBI from a blast injury, symptoms I couldn't control, a system that wanted to separate me rather than accommodate me. Then I met Sarah Martinez, not an admiral, just a chief petty officer who'd been through similar struggles and figured out how to keep serving. He looks directly at Sarah. What you taught me wasn't complicated. You taught me that I could acknowledge my limitations while maintaining my capability, that adaptation was strength rather than weakness, that seeking help was courage rather than failure. Simple concepts, but revolutionary in a culture that equated any limitation with disqualification. Davidson pauses, emotion visible on his face. I'm still here, still contributing, still serving, because you showed me it was possible, and I'm one of thousands. Every operator you've taught, every policy you've changed, every cultural barrier you've broken down, it's created space for people like me to keep serving despite being impaired. That's your legacy. Sarah feels tears threatening and doesn't fight them. This, the human impact, the lives changed, the careers saved, this is what makes everything worthwhile. The injury, the struggle, the years of fighting to prove herself. The eventual acceptance that she could never go back to who she was before, but could build something valuable from who she'd become. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Sarah looks at her reflection in the mirror. The Admiral's uniform fits well, tailored perfectly, the star gleaming on her shoulder boards. But what Sarah sees isn't just the uniform. She sees the 20-year-old recruit who wanted to prove herself, the hidden operator who couldn't share her experiences, the injured sailor who spent 2 years pretending to be fine, the instructor who learned to teach through limitations, the senior leader who's using position and authority to change systems that almost discarded her. All of these versions of herself, integrated into someone more complex and more honest than any single identity could have been. Her phone rings. It's Ensign Rodriguez. Except Rodriguez isn't an ensign anymore. She's a lieutenant junior grade now, having successfully completed Bud S and served with a SEAL platoon before sustaining her own combat injury during a deployment to East Africa. Admiral Martinez, I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. Thank you, Rodriguez. How are you doing? Sarah knows that Rodriguez has been struggling since her injury, a gunshot wound that shattered her femur, requiring extensive reconstruction and leaving her with permanent mobility limitations. Not great, honestly. They're talking about medical separation. My platoon chief says I can't meet physical standards anymore, that I'm a liability rather than an asset. Rodriguez's voice carries the same fear Sarah remembers from her own darkest moments. I feel like everything I worked for, Bud S, becoming an operator, it's all being taken away because I got hurt doing the job. Sarah recognizes this moment. It's the moment she had 5 years ago when Staff Sergeant Kowalski and his friends cornered her in the mess hall. The moment when hiding became impossible, and she had to choose whether to reveal her true capabilities or accept being diminished. Rodriguez, listen to me carefully. Your injury doesn't disqualify you from continued service unless you let it. You have options. Medical accommodation, modified duty, potentially transitioning to a training or support role where your operational experience is valuable, even if you can't return to a platoon. But I don't want a training role. I want to be an operator. I understand. But sometimes what we want isn't available anymore, and we have to choose whether to grieve what's lost or build something new from what remains. Sarah pauses. I wanted to stay in special operations. My injury took that option away. But fighting for retention, eventually teaching resilience, building programs that help other operators, that became more meaningful than continuing to do what I'd done before. Rodriguez is quiet for a long moment. Did you ever regret it? Choosing to stay and adapt rather than separating and starting over in civilian life? Sarah thinks about this question honestly. Some days, yes. Days when my symptoms are bad and I question whether the struggle is worth it. Days when I'm fighting bureaucracy and wondering if I'm actually making a difference. Days when it would be easier to just walk away. But you didn't walk away. No, because even on the hardest days I know that what I'm doing matters. Every operator I help retain, every policy I change that makes the system more accommodating, every example I set that limitation and leadership can coexist. It compounds. The impact grows beyond what I could see in any single moment. So what should I do? You should fight for your right to continue serving in whatever capacity you're capable of. You should demand proper medical accommodation. You should refuse to let anyone else define what your injury means for your career. And if you find that operational billets are genuinely closed to you, you should consider how your experience could be valuable in other roles. Training, mentoring, advocating for policy change. Sarah continues, her voice gentle but firm. Rodriguez, you're at a decision point. You can let bitterness about what you've lost consume you, or you can choose to transform the loss into purpose. Both responses are valid. Both are understandable, but only one leads to continued meaning. After the call ends, Sarah writes in her journal, a practice she's maintained since the mess hall incident 10 years ago. November 15, 2034. Promoted to Rear Admiral today, 22 years from enlisting to flag rank. The ceremony was everything I never expected my career to become. But the conversation that mattered most wasn't the ceremony. It was talking to Rodriguez, hearing my own journey reflected in her current struggle. The injury, the fear of separation, the question of whether continuing to fight is worth the cost. I told her what I wish someone had told me, that injury changes everything but doesn't have to end everything, that adaptation is possible, that limitation and value can coexist. I believe those things for her more easily than I believe them for myself. Even now, even as an admiral, I have moments of doubt, days when my symptoms are bad and I wonder if I'm fooling everyone, if they'll eventually realize I'm not capable enough for this level of responsibility. But then I look at the data, the thousands of sailors who've gone through resilience programs, the lives saved through earlier intervention, the careers preserved through better accommodation. The numbers don't lie. The work matters. And if my own journey, injury, struggle, adaptation, leadership, makes that work possible, then maybe the cost was worth it after all. Over her first year as a flag officer, Admiral Martinez implements changes that would have been impossible from any other position. She establishes formal medical accommodation protocols across all Navy communities, ensuring that sailors with managed disabilities can continue serving in appropriate billets. She mandates resilience training during all Navy schools and leadership courses, normalizing discussions of stress and mental health. She creates career pathways for sailors whose combat injuries prevent them from returning to operational billets, but whose experience remains valuable. Former operators can now transition to training, analysis, strategic planning, or specialized support roles without losing rank or facing career stagnation. She champions changes to medical evaluation boards, ensuring that decisions about injured sailors are made by personnel who understand both the operational context and the medical realities. No more situations like hers, where a logistics specialist's SEAL training was invisible to the people judging her fitness for duty. Most significantly, she personally reviews every case where a female service member with special operations experience faces medical separation. She becomes known, sometimes appreciated, sometimes resented, as the admiral who fights for broken operators. The resentment comes from commanders who view her advocacy as interference, as lowering standards, as allowing sentiment to override operational readiness. Sarah faces this resistance directly during a contentious meeting with a group of SEAL team commanders who question why she's blocking the separation of a female intelligence analyst with severe PTSD. Admiral, with respect, this sailor can't perform her duties, Commander James Hartley says, his frustration evident. She has panic attacks during mission briefs. She can't handle the stress of operational planning. She's a liability to the team. Sarah has reviewed the analyst's file. The woman, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, sustained psychological trauma during a mission in Yemen where she was captured and held for 36 hours before rescue. The PTSD is severe, documented, and currently unmanaged because Chen has been afraid to seek treatment. Commander, I'm not blocking her separation because I think she can return to operational intelligence work. I'm blocking it because the separation paperwork characterizes her PTSD as a personality disorder rather than a service-connected injury. That characterization affects her benefits, her disability rating, her entire post-military life. The medical board was presented with incomplete information because Lieutenant Chen was afraid to disclose the full extent of her trauma. Sarah pulls up Chen's file on the conference room screen. She was captured during a mission your team planned. She was interrogated and tortured for 36 hours. She provided no information despite significant physical and psychological pressure. She maintained operational security under conditions that would break most people. The room is silent. And when she came home, when she started having nightmares and panic attacks and couldn't function in high-stress environments, do you know what your command did? Nothing. No referral to specialized trauma care. No acknowledgement that what she experienced might require intensive treatment. Just documentation that she was underperforming and not meeting standards. Sarah leans forward, her voice hardening. So no, I'm not approving her separation until she receives proper treatment, and the characterization of her condition accurately reflects that it's a service-connected combat injury. After treatment, if she still can't perform intelligence duties, we find her a different role. We don't discard her because we failed to provide appropriate support. Commander Hartley's jaw tightens. Admiral, I understand you have personal experience with combat injuries, but we can't let every case of PTSD or TBI become a retention battle. We need operators who can do the job without accommodation. Commander, you need operators, period. And the pool of people willing and able to do special operations work is limited. When we take capable people, use them in combat, and then discard them when they're injured by that combat, we're not maintaining standards. We're destroying human capital. Sarah advances to another slide showing retention and recruitment data. SEAL recruiting is down 18% over the past 3 years. You know why? Because potential recruits see how we treat injured operators. They see people like Lieutenant Chen, who did everything right, who maintained operational security under torture, being separated with inadequate benefits and inaccurate characterizations. Why would anyone volunteer for that? The meeting ends without full resolution, but Sarah's intervention ensures that Chen receives proper psychiatric care at a facility specializing in captivity-related trauma. 6 months later, Chen is functioning better, though she'll never return to operational intelligence. Sarah arranges her transfer to a teaching position at the Naval Academy, where her experience becomes valuable in training the next generation. But the battle with Commander Hartley has consequences. He files a formal complaint arguing that Admiral Martinez is overstepping her authority, interfering with command prerogatives, and allowing her personal history to cloud her judgment. The complaint makes its way to the Chief of Naval Operations, who calls Sarah to his office. Admiral William Thompson is a submariner with a reputation for being data-driven and apolitical. He gestures for Sarah to sit, then pulls up Hartley's complaint on his screen. Admiral Martinez, I've read Commander Hartley's concerns. I've also read your response and reviewed Lieutenant Chen's case file. Help me understand something. Are you interfering with medical separation decisions, or are you ensuring those decisions are made properly? Sarah appreciates that Thompson is asking rather than assuming. Sir, I'm ensuring that medical separation decisions for special operations personnel are made with full information and accurate characterizations. In Chen's case, the initial separation package was going to characterize her PTSD as a pre-existing personality disorder. That's factually inaccurate and would have significant negative impact on her post-service benefits. And you think Hartley's medical board didn't know that? I think Hartley's medical board was presented with incomplete information because Lieutenant Chen was afraid that disclosing her full trauma would be seen as weakness. I think the command culture in some SEAL teams still punishes people for seeking mental health treatment, and I think we have a systemic problem where injured operators are being pushed out before they receive adequate care. Thompson is quiet for a moment, studying Sarah's service record on his screen. You know, when you were nominated for flag rank, there was debate. Some people argued that your personal experience with combat injury made you too sympathetic to retention cases, that you'd be unable to make objective decisions about medical separations. Sir, my personal experience makes me aware of how the system fails injured operators. That's not bias, that's informed perspective. Agreed. But it also means you need to be careful about when you intervene. Every medical separation case can't become a flag-level review. You'll overwhelm yourself and create resentment among commanders who feel you don't trust their judgment. Thompson leans back in his chair. Here's what I'm directing. Establish clear criteria for when cases get elevated to your level. Develop training for medical board members on accurate characterization of service-connected injuries. Create an appeals process so that operators who feel they've been unfairly characterized have recourse without needing an admiral's intervention. He pauses. And Martinez? Pick your battles. You can't save everyone. Some operators need to separate, not because we're discarding them, but because they genuinely can't perform their duties, and continued service would harm them. Your job is to ensure the system is fair, not to prevent all separations. Sarah knows Thompson is right. She's been operating from a place of personal memory, remembering how close she came to unjust separation, how hard she had to fight, how many barriers existed. That memory drives her advocacy but also risks making her unable to accept that some separations are appropriate. Understood, sir. I'll develop the framework you described. Good. And Martinez? For what it's worth, I'm glad you're in this role. The Navy needs someone willing to fight for injured sailors. Just make sure you're fighting the right battles. Over the next 6 months, Sarah implements Thompson's directives while grappling with the reality she's been avoiding. Her own TBI is progressing. The migraines are more frequent, 3 or 4 per week instead of occasional episodes. The sensory processing difficulties are worsening. She can barely tolerate the Pentagon's fluorescent lighting without triggering symptoms. Her cognitive processing, always slightly slower since the injury, is noticeably declining. Dr. Chen, her longtime therapist, now also consulting on her medical care, is direct during their monthly evaluation. Sarah, the neurological imaging shows continued degradation. The initial blast damage created vulnerabilities that are worsening with age and stress. This is consistent with TBI progression patterns, but it's happening faster than we'd hoped. What does that mean practically? It means the adaptations you've developed are going to become less effective. The migraines will get worse and harder to manage. The cognitive difficulties will become more noticeable. Eventually, you'll reach a point where accommodation isn't sufficient to maintain your current level of function. Sarah feels the familiar spike of fear, the same fear she felt 10 years ago when she first received her TBI diagnosis. The fear that injury will define her, will end her capability to serve, will transform her from leader to liability. How long? Impossible to predict precisely. Could be 2 years, could be 5. But Sarah, you need to start planning for transition. Not immediate separation, but realistic assessment of what roles you can sustain as your symptoms progress. That night, Sarah sits alone in her Pentagon office, staring at her computer screen. She's reviewing the resilience program's latest quarterly results. Exceptional outcomes, thousands of sailors trained, measurable improvements in retention and readiness. But she's also thinking about Dr. Chen's words. Eventually, you'll reach a point where accommodation isn't sufficient. Her phone buzzes. A text from Rodriguez, now a lieutenant commander working in SEAL Training Command. Ma'am, heard through the grapevine that your medical eval wasn't great. You okay? Sarah appreciates the concern but isn't ready to discuss her declining health publicly. She types a careful response. Managing. Nothing acute. Thanks for checking. Rodriguez's reply comes immediately. You taught me that acknowledging struggle isn't weakness. Don't forget your own lessons. Sarah smiles despite herself. Rodriguez is right. She's falling into the same pattern she spent a decade teaching others to avoid. Hiding symptoms, minimizing decline, pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. She opens her journal, the private space where she's been documenting her journey since the mess hall incident. January 8, 2035. Dr. Chen confirmed what I've been noticing but not acknowledging. The TBI is progressing. My brain is deteriorating in ways that will eventually make my current role impossible. I'm terrified, not of the symptoms themselves. I've managed those for years, but of what it means. I've built my entire flag officer career on being the injured leader who demonstrates that limitation and capability can coexist. What happens when my limitations exceed my capability? Do I become a cautionary tale instead of an inspiration? Proof that injured operators eventually fail rather than proof that they can adapt? Thompson told me to pick my battles. But what if the most important battle is against my own declining function? What if the example I need to set isn't that you can serve forever despite injury, but that you can recognize when it's time to transition with dignity? I'm not ready for that conversation yet, but I'm starting to understand it's coming. 3 months later, during a high-level briefing to the Secretary of Defense, Sarah experiences her first public episode. She's presenting data on fleet-wide resilience implementation when the migraine hits, sudden, severe, debilitating. Not the gradual onset she's learned to manage, but acute pain that makes vision impossible and thinking nearly so. Sarah stops mid-sentence, her hand going to her temple reflexively. The room full of senior defense officials watches as she struggles to continue. I apologize, she manages. I need a moment. But the moment extends. The pain intensifies. Sarah realizes with growing horror that she's going to have a full neurological episode in front of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, and dozens of senior leaders whose confidence in her judgment depends on believing she's capable despite her injury. Her aide, Commander Marcus Webb, a SEAL who went through Sarah's resilience program 5 years ago before transitioning to staff work, steps forward immediately. Admiral Martinez needs to pause for medical attention. I can continue the briefing from her notes. The Secretary of Defense, Secretary Patricia Williams, intervenes. Let's take a 15-minute break. Admiral Martinez, please get whatever care you need. We'll resume when you're able. Sarah wants to refuse, wants to push through, wants to demonstrate the resilience she spent years teaching. But Dr. Chen's voice echoes in her mind. Acknowledging when you need help isn't weakness. She nods, allows Webb to guide her to a medical office adjacent to the briefing room. A Navy corpsman evaluates her, administers medication, dims the lights, and gives her space to work through the episode. 20 minutes later, Sarah returns to the briefing room. Her vision is still slightly compromised. Her speech is slower than normal, but she's functional enough to continue. My apologies for the interruption. As most of you know, I have a service-connected traumatic brain injury that occasionally causes acute episodes. This was one of those episodes. Commander Webb has the detailed data if you need it, but I can continue with the high-level summary. She proceeds with the briefing, working through lingering symptoms, demonstrating in real time what she's been teaching theoretically, that capability can coexist with visible impairment, that acknowledging limitation doesn't equal incompetence, that leaders can be human and still effective. After the briefing, Secretary Williams asks Sarah to stay behind. That took courage, continuing after a medical episode in front of the entire senior defense leadership. Madam Secretary, it would have taken more courage to stop, to acknowledge that maybe I can't do this anymore. Williams studies Sarah for a long moment. Are you telling me you're considering stepping down? I'm telling you that my condition is progressing, that the adaptations I've developed are becoming less effective, that eventually, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually, I'll reach a point where I can't perform at the level this position requires. And when you reach that point, what will you do? Sarah hasn't fully formed the answer yet, but speaking it aloud helps crystallize her thinking. I'll transition, not separate entirely, but move to a role that matches my actual capabilities, rather than trying to force myself into a role I can't sustain. Maybe teaching at the War College, maybe consulting on policy without the day-to-day demands of an operational staff position. Maybe writing, documenting what I've learned so it outlasts my ability to teach it directly. Williams nods slowly. That's the right answer. But Sarah, you're not there yet. Today's episode was acute, but you recovered. You completed the briefing. You demonstrated exactly what you've been teaching, that having a medical episode doesn't disqualify you from leadership. She pauses. However, I want you to start developing succession plans. Identify people who can take over your programs. Document your methods thoroughly. Build systems that don't depend on your personal involvement, not because you're leaving tomorrow, but because eventually you will leave, and the work needs to continue. Over the next year, Sarah focuses on exactly that, building systems that outlast her personal involvement. She promotes Rodriguez to captain and designates her as the successor for the Resilience Program's operational leadership. She works with Dr. Chen to document treatment protocols for operators with various injury types. She writes policy manuals, training curricula, implementation guides, everything needed for the programs to continue without her direct oversight. She also does something she's resisted for years. She agrees to be interviewed extensively about her journey, allowing Dr. Whitman to document not just the professional accomplishments but the personal cost. The interviews are difficult. Sarah has to confront aspects of her experience she's avoided examining. The anger at being injured, the shame of hiding, the fear that drove her to prove herself compulsively, the slow acceptance that she'd been fundamentally changed by trauma. You've spent 15 years building programs to help other operators, Dr. Whitman observes during one session. But have you actually processed your own trauma? Or have you just channeled it into work? Sarah doesn't have a good answer. The work has been both healing and avoidance, a way to make meaning from suffering while not fully confronting the suffering itself. I don't know if I've processed it. I've survived it. I've used it. I've transformed it into something that helps others. But processing it, accepting it, being at peace with it, I'm not sure I'm there. What would being at peace with it look like? Sarah thinks about this. It would look like acknowledging that the injury genuinely limited me, that I lost capabilities I'll never recover, that the person I was before the blast is gone and no amount of adaptation brings her back. It would mean grieving that loss without immediately trying to compensate for it by helping others. And why haven't you done that? Because if I stop compensating, if I stop helping others, then what's left? Just the injury, just the loss, and that's not enough to build a life on. Dr. Whitman's voice is gentle. Sarah, Your life is already built. Your accomplishments are real. Your impact is measurable. You don't need to keep compensating. You've already proven your value 1,000 times over. The question is whether you can accept that value without continuing to perform it compulsively. The insight hits hard. Sarah has been performing resilience rather than living it, constantly demonstrating capability to prove that injury doesn't define her, rather than simply existing as someone who happens to be both injured and capable. 16 months after the episode in front of the Secretary of Defense, Sarah faces another decision point. She's been offered a position as the Navy's first-ever 2-star admiral for personnel and readiness, effectively making her the service's senior leader for all human capital issues. The promotion would be historic, a female admiral with publicly documented combat injury reaching 2-star rank, a demonstration that the Navy values resilience and adaptation at the highest levels. But it would also require performance demands that Sarah's declining health may not support. More travel, more high-stakes briefings, more public visibility, all while managing symptoms that are progressively worsening. She discusses the decision with the people who know her best. Commander Reeves, now fully retired but still Sarah's informal mentor. Take the promotion. You've earned it. And even if you can only serve 2 years before medical issues force retirement, those 2 years will set precedents that outlast you. Dr. Chen, her therapist and medical advisor. Be honest about your limitations. If you take the promotion, do it with full disclosure about your condition. Don't set yourself up to fail by pretending you're healthier than you are. Rodriguez, her designated successor. Ma'am, you taught me that capability and limitation coexist. If you believe you can do the job despite your symptoms, then do it. If you don't, then step back. But make the decision based on honest assessment, not fear. Her parents, now in their 70s. Mija, you've given the Navy everything. If you want to keep giving, we support you. But you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to prioritize your health. You don't have to keep proving yourself. Sarah takes a week of leave, a rare break from the relentless pace she's maintained for 15 years, and returns to San Antonio. She stays with her parents, sleeping in her childhood bedroom, eating her mother's cooking, reconnecting with the version of herself that existed before the military, before the injury, before the compulsive need to prove her worth. One evening, her father asks the question that's been hovering unspoken. Are you happy, Sarah? She's been asked this before, but never quite felt able to answer honestly. Now, sitting in her parents' living room with nothing to prove and no one to perform for, she tries. I'm satisfied. I've accomplished things I never imagined. I've helped thousands of people. I've changed systems that needed changing. But happy? She pauses. I don't know if happiness is compatible with the kind of life I've lived. I'm too aware of what I've lost. Too conscious of my limitations. Too driven to keep proving that the loss and limitations don't define me. Her mother, Elena, sets down her coffee. Maybe it's time to stop proving and start living. I don't know how to separate those. Proving has been my way of living. Then maybe you need to learn a different way. Sarah returns to Washington with a decision. She'll accept the 2-star promotion, but she'll do it differently than she's done anything before. She'll be completely transparent about her medical condition. She'll build accommodation into her schedule proactively, rather than hiding symptoms and pushing through. And she'll set a firm timeline. 3 years in the role, then transition to retirement, and a second career in teaching, writing, and advocacy outside the military structure. The promotion ceremony takes place on an unusually warm March day. Sarah's parents attend, along with dozens of operators she's mentored, commanders she's worked with, and sailors whose careers she's saved through her advocacy. Admiral Thompson, now serving as Chief of Naval Operations, administers the oath and pins on Sarah's 2nd star. Rear Admiral Martinez represents something the Navy needs more of: leaders who demonstrate that excellence doesn't require perfection, that capability can coexist with limitation, and that the most valuable service members might be those who've learned to function effectively despite significant challenges. He turns to address Sarah directly. Your promotion today is historic, but what matters more is what you'll do with this position. You have 3 years, your stated timeline, to institutionalize everything you've built, to ensure that the programs, the policies, the cultural changes you've championed become permanent rather than dependent on your personal involvement. That's your mission, Admiral. Make yourself obsolete by building systems that don't need you. Sarah accepts the challenge. Over the next 3 years, she operates at a pace that would be unsustainable if she weren't so deliberate about managing her health. She implements sweeping changes to Navy personnel policy, mandatory resilience training at every stage of career development, comprehensive medical accommodation protocols, career pathways for injured sailors that don't require separation, mental health support integrated into operational commands rather than separated evaluation systems that account for accommodation without penalizing adapted performance. She also faces the personal reality of her declining function. The migraines increase to near daily occurrence. Her cognitive processing continues to slow. She starts using assistive technology, note-taking apps, reminder systems, scheduling tools that compensate for memory difficulties. Most significantly, she stops hiding these accommodations. When she's briefing senior leaders and needs to reference her notes more frequently than others might, she explains why. When she has to cancel meetings due to acute symptoms, she's transparent about the reason. When she needs environmental modifications, dimmed lighting, reduced noise, frequent breaks, she requests them openly. The modeling is powerful. Junior officers see a 2-star admiral acknowledging limitation and requesting accommodation. They internalize that seeking help is compatible with senior leadership. The culture shifts incrementally, not perfectly, not uniformly, but measurably. 2 years into her 3-year timeline, Sarah receives an unexpected visitor at her Pentagon office. Petty Officer 3rd Class Marcus Kowalski, now retired from the Navy, requests a meeting through official channels. Sarah hasn't thought about Kowalski in years. The mess hall incident feels like ancient history, belonging to a different person in a different life. But the request triggers memories. The harassment, the escalation, the 15 seconds that destroyed her cover and changed everything. She approves the meeting, curious about what Kowalski could possibly want after 17 years. He arrives in civilian clothes, looking older than Sarah remembers. He'd be in his early 40s now, his face showing the wear of difficult years. He's nervous, his body language suggesting this meeting costs him significant emotional effort. Admiral Martinez, thank you for seeing me. I know I don't have any right to your time. Sarah gestures for him to sit. What can I do for you, Mr. Kowalski? He's quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how to begin. I wanted to apologize for what happened in the mess hall that night, for the harassment, for escalating the situation, for everything. His voice is rough. I've thought about it a lot over the years. How stupid I was. How I misjudged you completely. How I could have ended your career before it really started. Sarah studies him, trying to reconcile the arrogant young petty officer from her memory with this humbled man seeking forgiveness. What prompted this visit after all these years? I've been in therapy. VA stuff, PTSD from a deployment that went bad, substance abuse issues after I got out. My therapist has me working through amends, making peace with people I've harmed. He meets Sarah's eyes. You're at the top of that list. Because of one incident 17 years ago. Because I've watched your career from a distance, read about your programs, saw your Senate testimony, followed your promotions, and I realized that I almost destroyed something important. If you'd responded differently that night, if you'd accepted medical separation instead of fighting, thousands of sailors wouldn't have the programs you built. Kowalski leans forward, his hands clasped tightly. I was a stupid kid who thought he could intimidate you because you were small and female and working a non-combat rate. I didn't know you were an operator. Didn't know you had more training than I'd ever have. Didn't know you were managing a combat injury while maintaining your cover. I just saw someone I could push around to make myself feel bigger. And when I responded by putting you on the ground, I was humiliated, angry. Wanted to file charges, make you pay for embarrassing me in front of hundreds of people. He shakes his head. But my chain of command reviewed the video, told me I'd initiated the confrontation, that I was lucky you showed restraint. Still, I blamed you. Spent years thinking you'd overreacted, that you were the problem. What changed? I deployed 6 months after the mess hall incident. Afghanistan, 2018. My platoon got hit during a routine patrol. IED, small arms fire, the whole nightmare. I froze, completely froze. Couldn't function, couldn't fight back, couldn't do anything except huddle behind cover while my team engaged the enemy. Kowalski's voice drops. They got me out, but I was useless. Developed PTSD. Couldn't handle any kind of stress without panic attacks. The Navy separated me medically, and I fell apart. Substance abuse, homelessness for a while, complete breakdown. And through all of it, I kept thinking about you, about me, about how you'd managed a TBI while maintaining operational capability, how you'd been injured in actual combat but still functioned when I couldn't function after one bad patrol, how you'd taken what broke you and turned it into a career helping others while I just collapsed. Sarah feels unexpected empathy for this man who'd once harassed her, who'd almost derailed her career, who now sits broken by his own trauma. Mr. Kowalski, PTSD isn't a character flaw. It's an injury, just like TBI. The fact that you struggled doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But you didn't struggle. You adapted. You built a whole career on adaptation. I struggled enormously. Sarah corrects gently. I hid my symptoms for 2 years. I denied I needed help. I pushed myself compulsively to prove I wasn't broken. That's not healthy adaptation. That's trauma response. I only started genuinely adapting when hiding became impossible. She pauses. What you saw in my career trajectory isn't absence of struggle. It's struggle that eventually found productive channels. But there were years when it easily could have gone the other way. Kowalski nods slowly. The VA got me into one of your resilience programs. Modified version for veterans, but based on your methods. That's when I started actually dealing with my trauma instead of just drowning in it. That's when I learned your story, realized you were the logistics specialist from the mess hall. And you're doing better now? Better. Not fixed, I don't think I'll ever be fixed, but functional. Working as a peer counselor at the VA, helping other veterans navigate the system. It's not much, but it's something. Sarah recognizes the parallel. Kowalski transforming his own struggle into service to others, just like she did. Different scale, different context, but the same fundamental pattern. That's not much. That's exactly the kind of work that matters. You're using your experience to help people who are where you were. That's valuable. I wanted you to know that the person who harassed you 17 years ago eventually learned from what you teach, that your work reaches further than you probably realize, and that I'm sorry for what I did. Sarah accepts the apology, recognizing that Kowalski needs it more than she does. The mess hall incident stopped defining her life years ago. It was the catalyst for change, but not the change itself. Apology accepted, Mr. Kowalski, and thank you for the work you're doing now. Keep helping veterans. Keep sharing what you've learned. That's the best amends you can make. After he leaves, Sarah sits in her office reflecting on the unexpected full circle. The man who once epitomized everything she feared, being dismissed, being underestimated, being attacked for showing capability that threatened others, now represents something different. The possibility of growth, of learning, of transformation through struggle. She updates her journal. March 22nd, 2037. Kowalski came to apologize today. 17 years after the mess hall incident that changed my life, the person who triggered it showed up seeking forgiveness. I didn't realize until today that I'd been carrying anger about that night. Not conscious anger. I'd processed the incident, moved past it, built a career partly because of it. But underneath, there was resentment, that he got to be stupid and recover from it while I had to be perfect and still fight for retention. That his failure was treated as normal, while my injury was treated as disqualification. His apology released something I didn't know needed releasing. Not because I needed his forgiveness. I'd already forgiven him, or thought I had, but because his transformation showed me that the systems I've built are working, that operators who struggle can find pathways to recovery. That trauma doesn't have to be the end of contribution. If Kowalski can go from harassing me in a mess hall to counseling veterans through their darkest moments, then maybe the work I've done actually matters. Maybe the systems are reaching people I'll never meet, helping in ways I'll never see. 2 more years until I transition out of active duty. 2 more years to build systems that outlast me. Then, what? Teaching, probably. Writing. Consulting. Some version of this work that doesn't require the pace and visibility of flag rank. I'm tired. More tired than I've ever been. The TBI progression is relentless. More bad days than good now. more accommodation required, more acceptance that my function is declining. But I am also at peace in ways I wasn't before. I've proven what I needed to prove, built what I needed to build. Now it's about finishing well, not proving more. Sarah's final year as a 2-star admiral is defined by deliberately building her succession. She promotes Rodriguez to Rear Admiral, making her the first woman to reach flag rank after completing Bud S and serving in a SEAL platoon. Rodriguez's promotion ceremony becomes a symbolic passing of the torch, Sarah administering the oath to the officer she mentored from ensign through every stage of development. "What you've built, I'll maintain," Rodriguez tells Sarah after the ceremony, "but I'm also going to expand it. Take the principles you developed for special operations and apply them across the entire joint force. You showed us what's possible. Now it's time to scale it." Sarah also works with Dr. Chen to establish the Martinez Center for Operational Resilience, a research and training facility at the Naval Postgraduate School that will continue developing and refining resilience methods long after Sarah retires. The center is funded through a combination of Navy resources and private donations from veterans organizations who recognize the value of Sarah's work. Most importantly, Sarah writes, she documents everything: the programs she's built, the policies she's changed, the battles she's fought, the lessons she's learned. The writing is both professional and personal, technical manuals alongside memoir, creating a comprehensive record of how one injured operator transformed personal struggle into systemic change. Dr. Whitman's book, featuring Sarah's story, becomes required reading at the Naval Academy and several war colleges. Sarah's own writing will eventually become a multi-volume work covering resilience theory, practical implementation, policy recommendations, and personal narrative. On her final day of active duty, Sarah stands in the same Pentagon conference room where she experienced her first public medical episode 3 years earlier. This time, she's not briefing. She's being honored at a retirement ceremony attended by the Secretary of Defense, the Chief of Naval Operations, and hundreds of sailors whose lives she's touched. Admiral Thompson delivers the keynote address. Rear Admiral Sarah Martinez retires today after 25 years of service. But those 25 years contain multiple careers: enlisted sailor, special operations support, logistics specialist, resilience instructor, program developer, policymaker, and finally flag officer. At each stage, she could have accepted limitations as endpoints. Instead, she transformed limitations into starting points for innovation. He turns to address Sarah directly. "You taught the Navy something we didn't know we needed to learn, that our most valuable leaders might be those who've struggled most visibly, that excellence doesn't require perfection, that capability and limitation can coexist, that asking for help is courage rather than weakness. Those lessons will echo through Navy culture long after you've left active service." After the ceremony, Sarah changes out of her uniform for the last time. The ritual feels both momentous and anticlimactic. Removing the 2 stars, folding the uniform, packing it away. She's no longer Rear Admiral Martinez. She's just Sarah, civilian, veteran, person whose identity is no longer tied to rank or position. Dr. Chen, attending the retirement reception, asks the question that matters: "How do you feel?" Sarah considers this honestly. Relieved, scared, proud, sad, all of it simultaneously. That's appropriate. You're ending one life and beginning another. The transition is supposed to be complex. I don't know who I am without the uniform, without the mission, without the constant need to prove that injury doesn't define me. Then you get to figure that out. That's what retirement is for, discovering who you are when you're not performing a role. Epilogue, 15 years later. The lecture hall at the Naval War College is packed. Over 300 students, a mix of military officers from all services and civilian defense officials, all here for the keynote address on resilience and leadership. Rear Admiral Jessica Rodriguez, now a 2-star admiral herself and the Navy's senior leader for personnel and readiness, introduces the speaker. 15 years ago, I was an ensign about to start Bud S, terrified that I'd fail, uncertain whether I had what it took to be a SEAL. I met a woman who'd just testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee, a woman who'd been injured in combat, who'd fought for retention, who'd built programs that changed how the military thinks about resilience. Rodriguez pauses, looking at the woman sitting in the front row. That woman mentored me through Bud S, through my first platoon deployment, through my own combat injury and the struggle to remain in service despite it. She taught me that limitation and capability can coexist, that asking for help is strength, that the most valuable leaders are those who've learned to function despite significant challenges. Everything I've accomplished in my career I owe to her example. The woman in the front row, now in her 50s, gray showing in her dark hair, moving with the slight stiffness that comes from a quarter-century of managing TBI symptoms, stands and walks to the podium. Dr. Sarah Martinez, professor of leadership and resilience studies at the Naval War College, former Rear Admiral, begins her lecture. 25 years ago, 4 sailors confronted me in a mess hall at Naval Station Norfolk. They thought they were harassing a logistics specialist who looked like an easy target. What they actually did was force me to stop hiding who I was, an injured operator trying to maintain a cover that had become unsustainable. She smiles, the memory now distant enough to find humor in it. Those 15 seconds in the mess hall changed my life, not because I demonstrated combat skills, that was just mechanics, but because being forced to reveal my capabilities meant I could no longer hide my limitations. I had to integrate both, had to become someone who was visibly injured and visibly capable simultaneously. Sarah advances to her first slide. That integration, accepting that I was both impaired and effective, became the foundation for everything I built afterward. Resilience programs, policy changes, cultural transformation, all of it emerged from one fundamental insight, that humans can function remarkably well in imperfect states if we build systems that support adaptation rather than demanding elimination of limitation. She teaches for 90 minutes, covering theory and practice, research and anecdote, professional insight and personal experience. The students are engaged, asking sophisticated questions, challenging assumptions, grappling with complex ideas about leadership and human performance. After the lecture, a young Marine captain approaches Sarah during the reception. "Dr. Martinez, I'm Captain David Chen. I read Dr. Whitman's book about you in college. It's part of why I joined the Marines and pursued infantry. I wanted to serve with the kind of leaders you described, the ones who show that struggle and strength coexist." Sarah recognizes the type, idealistic, motivated, not yet tested by the full weight of combat's consequences. "Have you deployed yet, Captain?" 6 months in Afghanistan, about to head back for a second deployment. So far, I've been lucky. No injuries, no major incidents. The deployments add up. The stress compounds. What feels manageable now might not feel manageable after your 3rd or 4th rotation. Sarah's voice is gentle but direct. When that happens, when you find yourself struggling, remember that asking for help early prevents small problems from becoming permanent damage. Chen nods seriously. "That's what I learned from your story, ma'am. That hiding injury makes it worse. That the strongest thing you can do is acknowledge when you need support." After Chen walks away, Admiral Rodriguez joins Sarah. "You know he's going to be fine. The next generation gets it in ways we never did. They've grown up with your programs, with the cultural changes you implemented. Asking for help isn't as stigmatized anymore. Acknowledging limitation isn't seen as weakness." "It's still not perfect," Sarah observes. "There are still commanders who resist accommodation, still operators who hide symptoms, still institutional bias against injured service members. But it's better, dramatically better than it was when you fought for retention 25 years ago. That's your legacy. Not that you fixed everything, but that you shifted the trajectory toward a healthier system." They walk outside, where spring has turned the War College grounds green and vibrant. Sarah moves more slowly than she used to, her balance slightly compromised by TBI progression, but she's comfortable with the pace. No longer rushing, no longer compulsively proving capability, just existing as someone who's both limited and accomplished. "Do you ever regret it?" Rodriguez asks. "The injury, the struggle, the years of fighting?" Sarah has been asked this question hundreds of times in dozens of variations. Her answer has evolved over the years, becoming more honest as she's gained distance from the experience. "I regret the injury. I'd rather have my pre-TBI brain function back. I regret the 2 years I spent hiding, compulsively proving myself, refusing help I needed. Those were wasted years driven by fear and shame." She pauses, watching students walk between buildings, young officers preparing for leadership challenges they can't yet imagine. But I don't regret the fight that came after. Building the programs, changing the policies, mentoring operators like you who carried the work forward. That gave meaning to the suffering, didn't eliminate the suffering, didn't make it worth it in some cosmic sense, but transformed it into something that helped others. That's as close to redemption as I think is possible. What would you tell that 20-year-old who enlisted from San Antonio? If you could go back and talk to her before everything happened. Sarah considers this carefully. I'd tell her that she's going to be broken by service, that she'll sustain an injury that changes her fundamentally, that limits her permanently. But I'd also tell her that being broken isn't the end of the story. It's the middle. That adaptation is possible. That limitation and value can coexist. That her struggle will eventually help thousands of others navigate their own. She smiles. And I'd tell her that those 4 sailors who harass her in the mess hall, one of them will come apologize 17 years later, transformed by the very programs she builds because of what they did. That the person who seemed like her enemy will become proof that the systems work. That change is possible. That even stupidity and cruelty can be opportunities for growth if we build the right support structures. Rodriguez laughs. That's a very mature, very measured response. What would you actually tell 20-year-old you? I'd tell her to duck when the flashbang goes off. Maybe the whole trajectory changes if she doesn't sustain the TBI. But then you don't build the resilience programs. Don't become an admiral. Don't change Navy culture. The injury was terrible, but it was also transformative. For you and for thousands of others. Sarah knows Rodriguez is right. The injury was the catalyst for everything significant in her career. Without it, she'd have been a competent logistics officer, maybe making chief or warrant officer, serving honorably but unremarkably. With it, she became someone who changed systems. I suppose that's the paradox of trauma, Sarah says quietly. You'd do anything to avoid it. But once you've experienced it, once you've survived it, once you've found ways to use it, you realize it's made you who you are. Not better than you would have been, not worse, just different. And the difference has weight, has meaning, has impact that the untraumatized version of yourself wouldn't have had. They stand in comfortable silence, watching the war college students move through their days, officers preparing for leadership challenges that will test them in ways they can't anticipate. Some will be injured, some will struggle, some will need help. And because of the systems Sarah built, more of them will receive that help than would have a generation ago. Ready for the faculty dinner? Rodriguez asks. No, but I'll attend anyway. Sarah smiles. That's resilience. Doing what needs to be done despite not feeling ready. Some things don't change, even 15 years into civilian life. As they walk toward the faculty building, Sarah thinks about the arc of her journey. From 20-year-old recruit to injured operator to hidden logistics specialist to exposed capability to instructor to flag officer to professor. Each stage building on the previous one. Each transformation forced by circumstance but completed through choice. She thinks about the 4 sailors in the mess hall, Kowalski's apology, Fisher and the 3rd recruit fading into anonymity, Murphy probably not even remembering the incident. How one 15-second confrontation rippled through decades, changing not just her life, but the lives of thousands she'd never meet. She thinks about the operators she's taught, the policies she's changed, the culture she's shifted, not perfected, never perfected, but moved incrementally towards something more humane, more honest, more supportive of humans functioning in imperfect states. And she thinks about her parents, both gone now, her mother passing 4 years ago, her father 2 years after that, how they never fully understood what she did but were proud anyway, how they saw her as their daughter who became an admiral rather than as an injured operator who transformed trauma into service. Maybe both perspectives are true. Maybe identity is always multiple, always complex, always defying simple categorization. Sarah enters the faculty building, ready for an evening of academic conversation that she'll manage despite symptoms that never fully go away. Ready to be exactly what she's become, someone who's both limited and accomplished, both injured and effective, both struggling and resilient, not despite her limitations, not in spite of her injury, but integrated with them, transformed by them, made into something that couldn't have existed without them. The mess hall was 25 years ago. The injury will be with her forever, and the work continues, carried forward by people like Rodriguez who learned from Sarah's example and are building on it in ways Sarah never imagined. That's legacy, not perfection, not completion, but continuation. The work outlasting the person who started it, the transformation extending beyond any single life. Sarah smiles as she enters the dining hall, ready for whatever comes next. Still adapting, still learning, still demonstrating that the story doesn't end when you're broken. It just becomes more interesting, more complex, more true. End. They made fun of her uniform. What happened in 15 seconds changed thousands of lives, including hers. But the real story wasn't those 15 seconds. It was the 25 years that followed, when one injured operator refused to let limitation define her and built systems that transformed how the military thinks about human capability, resilience, and the complex relationship between struggle and strength.